Chapter 501. After breakfast, Wyrm, Gadotsi and Matthew went on their way. It just so happened that Edison was attracted out of the laboratory by a special fragrance, and happened to meet Wyrm and the others who were about to leave. Then Edison and Helena saw Wyrm and the others off. Before leaving, Wyrm gave Edison a communication device similar to a modern mobile phone. After all, Wyrm didn't ask Edison, Helena, and Karna to follow them. In that case, they must have a communication device to ensure that they could contact each other at any time. This communication device was naturally made by Wyrm using Create Green item. In other words, Wyrm's ability could be regarded as a caster's level skill, item creation. In fact, this communication device was made by Wyrm based on a mobile phone. Its only function was to connect and call another communication device. As for the signal needed by an ordinary mobile phone, Wyrm used magic to replace it. As long as it was in this singularity, the two communication devices could contact each other. It was similar to the bracelet that Roman used to contact Gadotsi. After all, Wyrm made it based on Gadotsi and Chaldea's communication bracelet. However, Gadotsi's communication bracelet had more functions than the communication device made by Wyrm. Ray shift, virtual screen, establishment of material supply summoning circle, and other abilities were basically related to this communication bracelet. Although the inventor of the telephone has always been controversial, it was undeniable that Edison could indeed make a telephone. That was to say, if he wanted to, he could also fight a modern war. However, his enemy was something that modern war couldn't fight. Moreover, if he really did that, it would be as unreliable as building a hot spring hotel to serve ordinary people at the end of the world. Who would enjoy the comfort of a hot spring if they couldn't survive? As for Edison, if he had the time, he would probably know he would definitely choose to make a few more mechanical infantry instead of choosing to build a communication device. However, he didn't have many subordinates. They were all mechanical infantry that only knew how to obey orders, so building a communication device was useless. In Wyrm's opinion, it was better to install a monitor on the mechanical infantry. However, it was a bit extravagant to install a monitor on all the mechanical infantry. It was better to build a communication device. So far, Edison didn't do anything and just focused on building mechanical infantry. Therefore, Edison was quite interested in the gadgets that Wyrm gave him. Be ready to attack at any time. After saying that, Wyrm turned his gun into white deer, and left with Gadotsi and Matthew. After making the white deer a little bigger again, Wyrm stood on top of the white deer's head while Gadotsi and Matthew sat steadily on the white deer's back. With Wyrm's stabilizing magic, there was no need to worry about Gadotsi and Matthew being thrown out. Of course, the same was true for Wyrm. Without the mount skill, Wyrm's control over the mount had decreased by more than one level. After all, the white deer under him was transformed from his gun, and could not be regarded as a complete mount. Therefore, he also needed to use magic to stabilize his body. The white deer drove away from a small plain area in the west, and entered the mountainous area. The white deer jumped up and down, but it still had no effect on Wyrm and the other two on the white deer. Gadotsi and Matthew said a few words, and then pulled Wyrm down. After all, Wyrm promised to tell Gadotsi the story of his sister. Wyrm also shook his head helplessly, then he began to tell the story of his sister. Because of their trust and the fact that there was no need to hide anything, Wyrm did not plan to hide anything. Everything he said was the truth. However, Wyrm did not tell the story as a legend, but as Mayo's brother. After all, it was a continuous experience. Wyrm talked for a while before he left Mayo's world, and went to another parallel world. Wyrm also stopped. After all, he had to let Matthew and Gadotsi digest it. I feel that the man named Emiya Kiritsugu is bad. He actually wants to raise Mayu as a living tool. That Ainsworth is also not a good person. He actually wants to sacrifice a little girl to save the world. If he is really so strong, we can just think of other ways, Gadotsi said unhappily. Although this is the case from the perspective of human beings all over the world, Emiya Kiritsugu's ideal and Ainsworth's approach are both correct. Wyrm did not deliberately refute Gadotsi, but considered it from a more rational point of view. However, although Emiya Kiritsugu's worries were groundless, Ainsworth really did have the power to save the world. Although it was also considered an opportunist, to be able to trick Wuming, he was also quite capable. Then, just as Godatsi was about to refute, Wuming continued. However, let's not talk about whether they have the power to save the world first. Just the fact that they dare to touch my sister is absolutely not allowed. Wuming said rather domineeringly. However, in Godatsi's eyes, this was a Siscon. I didn't expect you to have a Siscon assassin. Godatsi snickered. This made Wuming feel rather helpless. It was not that he did not dare to admit it, but it was not a good word to say. At this time, Wuming and Godatsi heard a series of trivial words. It's just that I didn't expect the Holy Grail War in the parallel world to be like this. The Holy Grail is a humanoid life form, and it changed from being a magician to using a class card. This voice was undoubtedly Roman's. There's no one else now. Do you have to be so sneaky? Wuming said to the bracelet on Godatsi's wrist rather disdainfully. Sorry. Accompanied by Roman's apologetic voice, Roman's figure appeared along with the virtual screen. I was fascinated by your story just now and forgot to turn on the virtual screen for a moment. Although the magic consumption of the virtual screen was slightly higher, it was a little too much for Chaldea, who could not obtain external funding. However, because of Wuming's generous funding, Chaldea would not lack magic even if the virtual screen was always turned on. Previously, when Wuming went to Chaldea, although he did not give Roman a magic crystal or something like that, he gave him an automatic magic production device. This device was actually a defective product of the magic supply device in Blackie's body. The magic supply device in Blackie's body was transformed into an organ like a magic circuit, but this defective product could not be loaded into the human body. Although it was called a defective product, it was no different from the one in Blackie's body except that it could not be loaded into the human body. A device was enough to supply a servant with magic power. Wuming did not give Roman a device, but dozens of devices, and Wuming also increased the power, enough for Chaldea to squander. At this time, Matthew spoke faintly. A humanoid Holy Grail. Matthew was quite concerned about Mayu as a humanoid Holy Grail. The humanoid Holy Grail and the androids cultivated for the servant experiment could be said to have similarities. Matthew found a resonance. And this resonance was not a good thing. As Matthew's attending physician, Roman knew very well that this was not good for Matthew. As if he also knew that he started the wrong topic, Roman naturally shut up. Godatsi did not ask Wuming to continue the story, but asked the next step. Assassin, what are we going to do next? Then Wuming had a smile on his face. Of course, first get rid of the bystanders. Chapter 502. The three of them heard what Wuming said not long ago and looked at Wuming awkwardly. After all, when Wuming said this sentence before, he was referring to the American forces, but Godatsi and the others didn't think that Wuming would backhand an ally that had just formed an alliance. Of course, I'm not talking about Edison. Wuming shook his head with a smile. I'm talking about there. Wuming said as he pointed to the Rocky Mountains. You mean the Japanese Holy Grail forces? Roman said thoughtfully. Of course, now the Celtic forces in the easternmost part of the continent and the American forces in the westernmost part of the continent are on the same side. The Celtic forces have Maeve. Let's not talk about offense, but defense is more than enough. After all, in addition to Maeve, who was not weak, there was also Finn Dilmond, and the Indian servant that he had never met. However, according to Maeve, she had some relationship with Rama. Since she had some relationship with Rama, she was certainly not weak, so he didn't need to worry too much about the Celtic forces for the time being. In addition to that, there was also the location of Riverton, the base of the servants that were currently alone. Riverton is located in the Missouri River Basin. It's not that far from Denver. Currently, we're in an alliance with Edison, but there's another force in the middle. The situation isn't good, so I think we should get rid of the Japanese force that's obstructing Riverton and San Francisco's Denver. Godatsi, Matthew, and Roman heard Wuming's explanation, and also felt that Wuming was right, and they all nodded. However, in fact, Wuming had other reasons. If there was no accident, the one in Denver was Shitendaji. That Ghost King really wanted to see the world in chaos. Last time, even if he died, he still wanted to annoy Wuming. Although Shitendaji's poison was not so fatal to Wuming, it was not the same for other servants. Especially Gadatsi, it was Shitendaji's poison. If it eroded Gadatsi, then the last master of Chaldea would be dead. Not only that, Shitendaji's poison would continue to spread. Although he didn't know if there was an end to it, but if the entire American continent was poisoned, it would be quite a headache for Wuming. So this time Wuming didn't dare to leave her until the end. If she caused trouble again, it would be really bad. But even if it wasn't for Shitendaji, Wuming would still choose Denver as the first force. The reason was that this force occupied the Rocky Mountains, blocking the route between Riverton and San Francisco. While Greece and Rome were still fighting each other, they would take down this Holy Grail force in one fell swoop, and then join forces with Edison in the west and Maeve in the east to attack Greece and Rome. This was Wuming's plan. Then when are we going to attack Japan? Gadatsi asked the key question. Wuming's lips curled up, as if he was deliberately waiting for this question. Then Wuming's face was full of a bright smile. There's no time like the present. When we pass by the Rocky Mountains, we'll attack directly. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, shocked voices echoed throughout the world. Hey, hey, hey. Then among the voices that resounded through the sky, there was also a voice that sounded like a joke. Just kidding. A moment later, Boise. Wuming accelerated the speed of the white deer again, and according to the level, it had reached Class A. In this way, Wuming took Gadatsi and Matthew to Boise before noon, where they were supposed to arrive after noon. Inside the Boise fortress, in a shabby house, Karna was sitting opposite Gadatsi, as if he had just realized something. So that's how it is. Fujimaru-san wants to take down Denver City directly. Then Gadatsi, who was sitting opposite Karna, looked rather helpless. That's not what I want, Gadatsi said with lingering fear. Just now Wuming really scared her. With only 2 servants, he wanted to take down a city with an unknown number of enemies. To be honest, Gadatsi really didn't dare. Matthew sat next to Gadatsi and smiled awkwardly. To be honest, she also didn't dare. Then, as if he didn't hear Gadatsi's words, Karna nodded knowingly. I understand. I will help you take down Denver City together. Although there was some resistance, Gadatsi and others decided to listen to Wuming and attack Denver City directly. Therefore, after hearing Karna's approval, their mood improved. Then Gadatsi and Matthew felt a burst of joy in their hearts. Sure enough, Assassin was right. As long as we come to Karna, he will definitely help us. That's right, it was actually Wuming who proposed to come to Karna. First, it was to comfort Gadatsi and others who were frightened. Second, it was because Karna was powerful. Third, it was because the Rocky Mountains were close to Boise. Even Karna didn't want to have enemies next to him all the time. As mentioned before, the reason why Karna was stationed in Boise was to defend against the attack of Japanese forces. At this moment, the American forces could no longer withstand the attack of the enemy. Just like what Wuming said, as long as someone held Karna back, there were only 2 servants left, and they were Edison and Helena, who were caster class. In the face of the mysterious Japanese ghost clan, even if they risked their lives to destroy the Japanese forces, they would still be defeated. Therefore, Karna was personally stationed in Boise. In fact, if it weren't for the arrival of Wuming and others, Karna would have been wandering in the central plain basin of the Cordillera Mountains, checking the enemy's movements. Great, with the help of the famous hero Karna, this is really foolproof. On the left side of Gadatsi and Matthew, Roman's virtual screen appeared there. Karna, on the other hand, glanced at Roman and didn't say anything. Seeing that there was finally a servant who didn't attack him, Roman was a little touched. It seems that when Karna doesn't talk to others, it means that Karna hates you, poor Roman. Wuming, who was sitting on the right side of Gadatsi, looked at Roman's face and felt that it was better not to tell him the truth. In fact, Roman's virtual screen was there from the beginning, but Karna didn't know why he subconsciously ignored it. If the enemy is really Shitendaji, my flame can play a big role. The sun's flame could burn everything, so it was more than enough to deal with Shitendaji's poison. Wuming nodded and agreed with Karna's words. In fact, this was one of the reasons why Wuming looked for Karna. In that case, let's go back to Riverton first, and then I will release my noble phantasm. You pay more attention to Karna, use my noble phantasm as the signal, and we will attack Denver together. Wuming's intention was simple. First, they had to find Karna, then Wuming and the other two would return to Riverton and gather people to attack Denver. With Wuming and Karna around, the poison around Denver would not be a problem. After all, other than Karna's flame, Wuming could also use the trinkets in his noble phantasm. No problem, as long as I sense your noble phantasm, I will definitely come, Karna said solemnly. In that case, let's not waste any more time. We'll go first. After a simple farewell, Godatsi waved goodbye to Karna. Needless to say, Godatsi was quite lively. Although Karna only nodded at Godatsi's farewell, it was enough to see that Karna had a good impression of Godatsi. I feel like I'm being hated again. As Roman complained helplessly and Godatsi and Matthew comforted him, Wuming and the other two set off again. Then Wuming's enemy's noble phantasm rode on his face. Tinkyame. Chapter 503. Tinkyame. Hundreds of Japanese samurai swords rained down on White Deer, where Wuming and the other two were, and they launched a large-scale attack. This move reminded Wuming of Gilgamesh. Then, the place where the White Deer was attacked by hundreds of samurai swords exploded. Boom! The explosion was extremely violent. It seemed that the samurai swords came with the intention to kill. As far as they were concerned, the plain terrain on the plateau had become a basin. The smoke and dust caused by the explosion continued to fill the air. After the explosion, hundreds of samurai swords automatically flew back to the place where they came from, a high ground in the Rocky Mountains. Hundreds of samurai swords merged into one and fell into the hands of a fox-eared girl wearing a JK uniform. She wore the JK female high school uniform with white top and red bottom. She wore a red unlined gown, red stockings, and high leather shoes that looked like wooden clogs and leather shoes. She also wore a black hat on her pale orange hair. There were two shining scabbards on her body. One was a scabbard with silver light. The samurai sword was still in the scabbard, and the other scabbard exuded a golden light. There was no doubt that it was the scabbard of the golden samurai sword in her hand. The most conspicuous thing was the pale orange fox ears on the girl's head and the pale orange fox tail behind her, which made people think of a monster. However, she was not a monster. If Wuming was there, he would be able to see that she was a servant. It was very likely that she was a saber. After all, she was holding a samurai sword. Mission completed, I'm done. The fox-eared girl blinked her orange eyes, put the golden samurai sword in her hand into the scabbard, and was ready to leave. Then, she was also attacked by her enemy's noble phantasm, mythical Yggdrasil. In an instant, a huge holy light spear burst out from the basin full of smoke that had not yet dissipated. The light spear dispelled most of the smoke. The fox-eared girl also saw the target of her mission. There was a white figure in the place that was destroyed into a basin. That was undoubtedly the person who released the light spear. The white deer's figure still disappeared. Wuming maintained the position of throwing the spear. The holy silver armor on his body exuded light, and the helmet that he no longer wore was once again put on. Behind Wuming, on a piece of land that had not been destroyed, stood Godatsi and Matthew, who was holding a shield. There was a faint blue magical power on the shield. There was no doubt that this piece of land and Godatsi were protected by Matthew's noble phantasm. Since Wuming had a defensive noble phantasm, naturally, he did not need Matthew's protection. I can't believe you found my location. Although her tone was slightly shocked, the fox-eared girl still had a smile on her face. You are indeed a servant that the Spirit King takes care of. The fox-eared girl's body did not stop moving, and she quickly dodged backward. She was not a person like Wuming. If she was really hit by such a military noble phantasm, she would most likely be killed. Even if she did not die, she would lose a layer of skin. Rumble. The light spear hit the fox-eared girl's position. As the fox-eared girl's location was in a mountainous area, the mountaintop was completely destroyed by Wuming's noble phantasm. Countless stones rolled down, forming a scene like a landslide. Just when Matthew wanted to use his noble phantasm to block her, Wuming, who was below Matthew, waved his hand, indicating that Matthew did not need to use his noble phantasm. He took this opportunity to stop her. At the same time, the white light spear fell from the mountaintop, and Wuming firmly held it in his hand. Mythical Yggdrasil, legend of the Holy King. Releasing his noble phantasm again, Wuming gently threw out the spear that was emitting light in his hand. However, the noble phantasm that was thrown out this time did not turn into a huge light spear, but countless small light arrows that were arranged in a row. The principle of mythical Yggdrasil's noble phantasm was to control the light to give a huge blow to the enemy. Wuming's holy spear, Yggdrasil, had been left behind in Uruk. Therefore, Wuming's weapon in this singularity was just a simulated artifact. Therefore, it did not have a fixed form, so naturally, it could be used. Then, countless arrows of light hit the countless scattered mountain rocks. As if there was a chemical reaction, the rocks melted and dissipated into the air. It was dissolved by a high-heat substance called light. It was just a stone, so it was as easy as flipping one's hand to dissolve it with a noble relic. Then, the light arrows merged and turned into a holy spear that returned to Wuming's hand. Wuming looked deeply at the mountaintop that was missing a piece and frowned secretly. It doesn't look like it was hit. The fox-eared girl should not have left yet. Although the fox-eared girl was not close to Wuming, Wuming still saw a shadow of the enemy servant through the Lune rune. It was a fox-eared girl. Although Wuming was too far away, Wuming could not sense whether the fox-eared girl had left or not. His sixth sense told him that the person who launched the sneak attack was indeed not dead. He had to say that the opponent had a good plan. Because the distance was too far, Wuming could not sense the enemy servant around him. As long as there were servants, once they were close to each other, they would be able to sense each other. For Wuming, who had a strong mental strength, as long as the servant was not an assassin, it was basically impossible to rely on sneak attacks to get close to him. However, in this way, Wuming could not prepare in advance, just like the fox-eared girl, releasing a noble phantasm from a long distance. Although the control precision of the noble phantasm would be reduced if it was too far away, it could directly hit the target through prediction and other various factors. It was like a sniper sniping the enemy from a long distance. There were many factors involved in successfully hitting the target, so ordinary people could not be snipers. From this, it could be seen that the fox-eared girl was quite intelligent. However, after Matthew defended the attack and protected Gadatsi, Wuming also found the enemy's position through reverse inference. Before the smoke dissipated, Wuming threw a noble phantasm. Wuming's strong vision also allowed him to see the enemy when the noble phantasm broke through the smoke. It was the fox-eared girl. Although the noble phantasm also hit the fox-eared girl's position, Wuming did not think that the fox-eared girl would not consider the unexpected situation of being attacked by the enemy's noble phantasm. But it doesn't matter. I have no reason to attack them. Now I have a reason. Wuming whispered to himself. Behind Wuming, Matthew quickly checked on Gadatsi's condition. "Senpai, are you okay?" Matthew was slightly excited and shouted. "I'm fine. Thanks to Matthew's protection, I'm not hurt at all." Gadatsi showed Matthew a big smile and then hugged Matthew, which made Matthew's face blush. "What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened?" Suddenly, Roman's figure appeared in front of them along with his words. A virtual screen appeared. "Ah, what's going on?" Roman seemed to be panicking. Due to the diffusion of the fox-eared girl's noble phantasm, the surrounding ground only sank by 1 or 2 meters. However, the place where Matthew and Gadatsi were standing was not hurt. As a result, Matthew and Gadatsi were standing on a 2-meter-high platform made of mud. Wuming was below the platform. He did not enter Matthew's protection at all. He completely resisted the attack, and then released his noble phantasm to defeat the enemy. We were attacked by the Japanese forces. Chapter 504. After hearing Wuming's words, Roman was shocked. Hey. What the hell is going on here? Did anything happen to Li Xiang? The attack just now actually cut off the communication between the two sides. It really gave me a fright. Roman said in a slightly panicked manner like an ordinary person. Because the Magic King sent a few holy grails to this singularity. Or maybe this singularity was affected by the Magic King. The magic content in the singularity has increased a lot. Although the connection between Gadotsi and Chaldea was not completely blocked, if there was any magical fluctuation, it was easy to cut off the connection. In the sudden attack just now, the connection between Gadotsi and Chaldea was cut off. It was a good example. It's okay, Doctor. Matthew protected me very well, and the enemy was also killed by assassin. After going through so much, Gadotsi's heart became optimistic, and she did not panic because of the sudden attack. Phew. It's good that nothing happened. Roman's heart was finally at ease. Although I don't want to discourage you, unfortunately, the enemy servant was not killed by me, she escaped. Wyrm jumped on the small platform where Gadotsi and Matthew were, and his helmet touched again, revealing his dignified face. She was not killed by you, but thinking about it, the enemy is also a servant, she should have a way to save her life. Roman touched the back of his head and smiled, but unfortunately Gadotsi and the others did not pay attention to him. Her? That means the enemy servant is a female. Gadotsi noticed Wyrm's words. Indeed, the moment I used my noble phantasm to hit the enemy, I saw the enemy's face. It was a girl in red with fox ears and a fox tail, and the enemy was using a golden katana, so it seems that the enemy has some connection with the Japanese forces. In the territory of the Japanese forces, a black hat, fox ears, fox tail, a golden katana, and ancient clothing, all signs pointed to the fact that the enemy was a servant of the Japanese forces. A servant with Japanese attributes wearing a tsurugi hat. I'm afraid that's the only one. Roman played his role as a support member very well. Hey, Doctor, do you know who the enemy is? Matthew asked curiously. I know, after all, I can't be an effective support here, so I read a lot of books about history and mythology. He touched the back of his head as if he was embarrassed. Don't say that, Roman. You have to know that information is also very important. Wyrm shook his head at Roman. Wyrm knew the story of Maeve, King Arthur, and Gilgamesh, so he could participate in those places when he first came. If Wyrm didn't know anything, he would definitely be in the dark. Gadotsi also nodded. She didn't think that the doctor had no role in Chaldea. So, Doctor, who is the enemy? After Gadotsi asked the question, Roman nodded and began to explain. The black hat is a kind of black top hat handed down from the Heian period of Japan. There are many kinds of black hats, and the standing black hat is one of them, but generally, the standing black hat is worn by men, and the most famous woman who wears the standing black hat is Suzaku-guzan. Suzaku-guzan? Wyrm was puzzled, he really didn't know this name. There are many rumors about Suzaku-guzan's identity, such as female thief, female ghost, angel goddess, etc. However, so far most people agree that she is the daughter of the demon king of the fourth heaven. She is the angel who was ordered to descend to earth during the Heian period. She didn't want to turn Japan into a demonic country, so she fell in love with Sakinu Tamura when they were killing ghosts together. In the end, she was killed by her lover. Roman briefly introduced the fox-eared girl Suzaku-guzan. But now, it seems like she is a female bandit who occupies a mountain and calls herself king. Roman smiled helplessly. According to Selander, the enemy's noble phantasm is countless golden katanas that fall like rain. That should be one of the three swords of Suzaku-guzan. The Manjushri, the Sword of Wisdom, and the Sword of Harmony. As Roman spoke, Wyrm also recalled the other katana that was emitting a silver glow. If that's the case, the katana that is emitting a silver glow is one of the other two swords, right? Roman nodded. That silver sword should be the sister sword of the Sword of Harmony. It is the Samantabhadra merciful sword. However, there are also rumors that the Sword of Wisdom is the same as the Sword of Wisdom. Wyrm thought of a guess. Since the Sword of Harmony was used to attack, the enemy must have used the Sword of Harmony for some other purpose, such as increasing the precision of control. This could also explain how the enemy could attack Wyrm, who was at the foot of the mountain from such a distance. However, this was just a guess. In short, the enemy would not take it. However, Wyrm had the advantage. If the enemy is an angel, she should have divinity. Roman thought for a moment and nodded. After all, every rumor is related to the angel. The probability of the enemy having divinity is very high. Then Wyrm smiled. Since she has divinity, I have a way to deal with her. After all, Wuming's Dragoness space had a lot of pseudo-heavenly locks. At the beginning, because he knew the magic of heavenly locks, Wuming deliberately made high-quality pseudo-heavenly locks. Even if they were not used, they would not disappear. After using them, as long as they were injected with magic, these pseudo-heavenly locks would be renewed. Wuming prepared those pseudo-heavenly locks to deal with the followers with divinity. Since the enemy has already made a move against us, I'm afraid the road back to Riverton will not be easy, so, Wuming paused for a moment, which made Gadotsi, Matthew and Roman puzzled. So let's go straight in. Wuming smiled at Gadotsi and the others. Ah! Screams resounded through the world. Good lord, after going around in circles, they still ended up attacking the enemy's base. Boise! Karna saw that a mountain in the Rocky Mountains had been blown up. When he took a closer look, he saw pure white and holy magic. There was no doubt that it was Wuming's noble phantasm. Is it that fast? I thought it would take a few hours to start. Although Karna's tone was doubtful, he did not stop moving. He held his golden spear, gave orders to the mechanical infantry in Boise City, and ran towards the location where Wuming released his noble phantasm. In any case, it was agreed that Karna would support them under the command of Wuming's noble phantasm. Hence, Karna left immediately. On the other side, Denver City. In a dark hall, behind a curtain without any means of lighting, a figure kept pouring wine and drinking wine. How did she know that it was wine? The fox-eared girl, or rather Ling Lu Guzin, had already smelled a lot of wine when she walked to the door. It's really good wine, Ling Lu Guzin thought to herself. Although she did not drink much, as a female thief who once occupied a mountain, she said that she would drink as long as she was told that it was good wine. However, she did not dare to drink the wine that the figure in front of her was drinking. It was poisonous wine. What if she drank it to death? Ling Lu Guzin walked into the hall and said without a care, I failed Shitendaji. Chapter 505. She didn't hesitate to call out the name of the figure behind the curtain. Her tone didn't have the slightest bit of respect. The other party was only able to make them submit temporarily because of the Holy Grail. They could still listen to normal orders, but if they encountered any orders that went against their will, they would naturally go back and fight back. Ah, I knew it would be like this. Shitendaji poured himself another bowl of wine and drank it slowly. On the other hand, Ling Lu Yuqian frowned slightly. She did not want to smell this kind of alcohol. It was like a slow-acting poison. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I was almost killed by a noble phantasm just now. If it weren't for Xiao Tonglian's support, I wouldn't be able to survive the sudden attack. With the help of the Silver Wisdom Sword, Ling Lu was able to come up with a plan to retreat. She had also planned for the enemy to launch an attack on her relic. Go ahead, but I think the other party will come to us soon. Don't lose your life, Shitendaji laughed mischievously. There's no need for you to worry. With that, Ling Lu Imperial Qian left the hall. So it's you. No wonder you're the second person who cut off my head. You're extraordinary. Shitendaji poured the wine into his bowl, but this time he didn't drink it. But it's fate that we're able to meet again. Shitendaji poured the wine on the ground. The carpet on the ground wasn't soaked by the wine. Instead, it seemed to have blended into the air, creating a different feeling. I'm looking forward to it. On the other side, Wuming was close to Denver City. After killing all the ghosts and spirits, he looked at the approaching Denver City. As I expected, it's been a tough journey. Although that was what he said, Gadotsi and Matthew looked uncomfortable. I feel like if we don't cause trouble for them, they won't send ghosts to attack us. Senpai, I feel the same way. The ghosts we met along the way were all on the way to Denver City. We should return to Riverton first. Matthew and Gadotsi whispered to each other. You're too naive, Junior Matthew. It looks like the enemy is only ambushing us on the way to Denver, but in reality, if we continue to head towards Riverton, they will free up their forces to deal with us. This is an open trap, remember that. Wuming said with an expression that said, You're still too inexperienced. Yes, Senior Cylinder. Matthew will remember that. As a result, Mashu replied in high spirits. Although Cylinder is right, why do I feel that this reason is a little far-fetched? Roman's voice came from Gadatsi's wrist. Well, assassin, don't give Matthew the wrong idea. Even Gadatsi felt that assassin was a little unreliable. Matthew looked confused. In any case, we're already here. I'm afraid the enemy won't let us go back so easily. Wuming did not deny that his statement was wrong. Looking at the ghosts and ghosts that kept pouring out of Denver City, Wuming did not think that he could just leave after provoking the enemy. If only it was that easy. Besides, Karna should be here soon. Let's take down Denver in one go. At this point, whether it was Gadatsi, Matthew, or Roman, no one could refute Wuming. Phew. That's the only way. Roman sighed and said helplessly, in this situation, retreating would make it easier for the enemy to sneak up on them from behind. I have to say, you guys still underestimate the power of a top-tier servant. Wuming smiled faintly, attracting the attention of Gadatsi and the others. A top-tier servant is similar to a champion. What's more, the spiritual base of this body is strengthened by the Holy Grail and my own body. It can be said that Matthew and I alone are enough to take down Denver City. Of course, that's only if the other party's servants are known to us. After all, as long as it was a servant, they should not be underestimated. Every servant had a noble phantasm, and the noble phantasm was the key to victory from defeat. As long as it's not an exceptional servant, then the only thing we need to pay attention to in Denver City is Shitendaji. Roman also looked serious after hearing Wuming's words. Selander is right, Tachika. Although your body has a slight resistance to poison, this time you are facing Shitendaji's divine wine. It's better to be safe than sorry. For ordinary people, just smelling Shitendaji's poisonous wine will kill them directly. Roman said so much to be on the safe side. Tachika and Matthew should stay here. Wuming said. It's too dangerous to let assassin go alone. Gadatsi was obviously not at ease. After all, it was Gadatsi's kindness. Wuming couldn't refuse again, so he smiled and promised again. Didn't I say that I'm a top-tier servant, and even if there is an emergency, I still know how to run, so don't worry. With that said, Wuming touched Gadatsi's little head, like a brother making a promise to his sister. Just when Gadatsi didn't say anything, a huge red flaming ghost hand attacked Wuming. Rashimandayanji. Wuming's face froze, and he immediately put on his helmet, then rushed toward the huge ghost hand with the holy lance in his hand. Mythical Yggdrasil. Once again, Wuming activated his noble phantasm, and the light lance in his hand became huge. However, Wuming didn't throw it away. If it exploded here, Gadatsi and Matthew would still be affected. Therefore, Wuming directly held the huge light lance and faced the red flaming ghost hand. Rumble. Wuming pushed the ghost hand all the way to a distance of 100 meters away from Gadatsi and threw the light lance in his hand. By the way, the huge flaming ghost hand that was blocked by the light lance was also thrown directly, and there was a huge explosion in front of Denver City. Wuming stretched out his hand, and the holy lance returned to Wuming's hand. It's you, Ibaraki Kido? Wuming asked. After all, there were too many hints. It was related to Shitendaji, ghosts, Japanese monsters, Rashomon, plus he had met Ibaraki Kido in Uruk before. Wuming also remembered her voice, so when Ibaraki Kido shouted the name of the noble phantasm, Wuming had already guessed it. After Wuming asked, a female ghost dressed in yellow clothes with 2 horns on her forehead jumped out from an unknown place. Her entire body was covered in flames and she had 2 horns on her forehead. I, Ibaraki Kido, will protect Shitendaji's Devil's Kingdom. Don't even think about breaking my home and Shitendaji's. Ibaraki Kido didn't seem to know Wuming at all. It seemed that this Ibaraki Kido had no connection with the Uruk's defector, but that was normal. How could he meet a servant with the memory of him and Wuming? Wuming was not lucky, so how could it be so easy to hit the jackpot? I didn't deal with you in Uruk with the thought of less trouble. It seems that I have a chance today. After that, without waiting for Ibaraki Kido's reply, he directly went up and communicated with the other party with the Holy Lance. Wah! You bastard, you haven't started yet. Chapter 506. Facing the White Knight who sneak attacked him, thought he was? Ibaraki Dojo roared like a ghost who had been provoked. At the same time, a gust of wind blew around Ibaraki Dojo. The wind helped the fire, and the hot flame rose to the sky, rushing toward Wu Ming, who was attacking Ibaraki Dojo. Poochie! Wu Ming condensed his magic power into the holy spear in his hand and swept it across, dispersing the fire of karma. Then appeared in front of Wu Ming's eyes was a bone sword full of strange aura. Clang! Using the holy spear to block the bone sword slash, it made a harsh collision sound. Wu Ming slammed hard, trying to push Ibaraki Dojo, who was holding the bone sword, out, but found that he couldn't push him out. Ibaraki Dojo's whole body exuded magical power, and the bone sword in his hand was also attached with demon aura. Hey. Want to fight with a ghost? You're too naive. Ibaraki Dojo seemed to have found Wu Ming's mistake, and his face kept smiling, as if he was mocking and proud. Zzz. Wu Ming held the holy spear with both hands, and Ibaraki Dojo, who was holding the bone sword with both hands, kept exerting force. The holy spear and the bone sword rubbed against each other, making a harsh sound. Wu Ming really couldn't push Ibaraki Dojo away, but Wu Ming knew that although Ibaraki Dojo was a ghost, his strength as a servant didn't surpass Wu Ming. This point was discovered by Wu Ming when they fought, so it was reasonable to say that such a situation shouldn't happen. However, the other party seemed to have used an ability similar to the release of magic to strengthen his power. Ibaraki Kito's demonic aura was the best proof of this. However, Ibaraki Dojo wasn't the only one with skills. Wu Ming also had magical power. Boom! Wu Ming frowned, and a strong magical power burst out from the back of the armor below the shoulder, like a cloak, floating behind Wu Ming, and like a comet tail, providing Wu Ming with strength. As a result, Wu Ming gradually suppressed Ibaraki Dojo. What? Ibaraki Dojo was shocked. She did know that the white knight in front of her had the strength to suppress her, but she didn't expect that she still couldn't suppress the opponent with the help of Ghost Seed Demon. Is this guy berserker? How is he stronger than a ghost? Ibaraki Dojo complained loudly in annoyance. When she saw the white knight in front of her holding a gun, she thought that her enemy was a gunman. Who would have thought that the other party was so strong? What a coincidence, I'm berserker. Wu Ming was quite impressed with Ibaraki Kito. In this kind of situation, he still had the ability to chat with Wu Ming. Naturally, Wu Ming couldn't let him down. Damn it! Don't underestimate me. Ibaraki Dojo roared, and then swung her right hand down. That's right, maybe because the connection of the right hand was unstable, Ibaraki Dojo had been using her left hand to hold the sword. Ibaraki Dojo used her right arm to hold the bone sword, and her entire right hand fell down. As if she could control it, Ibaraki Dojo's right hand flew around Ibaraki Dojo. Was it Ibaraki Dojo's demonic hand that was cut off? Wu Ming Dojo's eyes narrowed, and Ibaraki Dojo finally had some free time. You didn't expect it, right? Since my right hand was cut off, although I took it back, it still couldn't connect with my right arm. Instead, it became my noble phantasm. Ibaraki Dojo looked at Wu Ming Dojo in front of her proudly. Take this. Rashomon Daionji. The demonic hand that was floating around Ibaraki Dojo turned into a huge flaming demonic hand, as Ibaraki Dojo's noble phantasm was released. Wu Ming felt a sense of danger from the demonic hand that was wrapped around the demonic hand. It was as if his noble armor was nothing and could hurt him at any time. However, even without the armor, Wu Ming Dojo wasn't weak. Therefore, he didn't do anything else and continued to suppress Ibaraki Dojo. Then, when the huge demonic hand grabbed Wu Ming shouted calmly, Karna! Ha! Ibaraki Dojo looked at Wu Ming Dojo in confusion, not understanding what he meant. Brahmastra, Brahma, cover the earth. A laser-like golden heat ray shot from afar and hit Ibaraki Dojo from below Wu Ming Dojo's arm. Dash! Ibaraki Dojo spat out a mouthful of blood from his mouth. The blood that spilled on the ground was filled with heat and started to burn. Bang dash! Wu Ming Dojo's magical power surged as he slapped Ibaraki Dojo away. Damn it, this is the breath of the sun. Ibaraki Dojo felt the scorching breath that was still in his body and spoke with difficulty. This scorching heat continued to burn Ibaraki Boy's body, making him suffer unspeakably. Just when Wuming Dojo was about to kill Ibaraki Dojo, a piece of talisman paper flew between Ibaraki Dojo and Wuming Dojo. Boom dash! The talisman paper turned into a flame that soared into the sky. However, from Wuming Dojo's point of view, it was just a flame barrier. Its purpose was naturally to buy time for Ibaraki Dojo, who was behind the flame barrier. Wuming Dojo swept out with his holy lance that contained powerful magical power, and the flame barrier was instantly broken. Where Ibaraki Dojo was originally, there was only a small pool of blood that had begun to burn. I forgot that Ibaraki Dojo had escaped from the 4 heavenly kings of Lai Guang. I'm afraid that has become a skill or a noble phantasm. Giving up chasing Ibaraki Dojo, Wuming Dojo turned around and returned. When he came to Matthew and Gadatsi, Wuming Dojo saw the person he had just called out. You came quite quickly, Karna. At this moment, a white-haired man in golden armor was standing beside Gadatsi and Matthew. The flame in his right eye had not subsided yet. It was Karna. I came with all my strength after seeing your noble phantasm. It was just a coincidence. Karna shook his head modestly, and the flame in his right eye swayed as he shook his head. It was quite interesting. Furthermore, it was quite clear that the Brahmastra had been launched from Karna's eyes. Karna really scared me when he came over just now. By the way, assassin, are you alright? Weren't you hurt by Karna? Gadatsi looked at Wuming Dojo worriedly. At this moment, Wuming Dojo's body was smoking. The smoke was coming out from the gaps in his armor, and it looked like he was being cooked. Don't worry. Because Sadrik was too close to the enemy, I didn't use a noble phantasm with a wide range of damage, Karna explained. Karna defended himself. He understood this point, and didn't use Brahmastra Kundala or anything like that. He couldn't use Sun Wheel, Vaishnavi Shakti, which could only be used when he stripped the golden armor. After all, the golden armor was still on Karna. The heat on my body was caused by Ibaraki Dojo's noble phantasm. I don't know why, but her ghost claw directly ignored my defense. I was injured, but it's not a big deal. As he spoke, Wuming took out a few bottles of healing potions from the golden ripples that he had already activated. Wuming took off his helmet, revealing his slightly red cheeks. Now some parts of his body were already cooked. After all, it was as if he was defenseless against an anti-army noble artifact that contained the karmic primordial fire. Even Hercules would lose his life if he was here. It was all thanks to Wuming's B++ durability that he was able to survive. Then Wuming drank the healing potion under everyone's gaze. The white smoke on his body disappeared, and his complexion returned to normal. After all, they had seen potions like this in Winterwood City, so Gadatsi and Matthew didn't look surprised. Since Karna is here, let's take Denver directly. Chapter 507. Gadatsi nodded. After all, they had fought for so long, and it would be unreasonable to leave now. The original team of 3, plus Karna, became a team of 4. The 4 of them headed toward Denver. Although Karna was with them, it still couldn't stop Gadatsi's burning heart. Gadatsi stared at Karna's eyes, which were no longer emitting sparks, and asked curiously, speaking of which, Karna can release a noble artifact with his eyes. It's really a divine artifact. It's no big deal. A true hero kills with his eyes, Karna replied casually. After all, he was a man of few words. Only you can say something like that. Wuming smiled helplessly at the side, then continued. I can't kill enemies with my eyes. I can only say that Karna is worthy of his reputation. Gadatsi and Matthew were amused by Wuming's teasing. In the face of Wuming's teasing, Karna didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. Although it's not very nice to interrupt you, you're about to go deep into the enemy's base. Is it really okay to look like you're going on a field trip? At this moment, Roman's voice suddenly came from Gadatsi's bracelet. This voice, is it the magician with the magical ability? Although he couldn't see the person, Karna remembered Roman's voice. The magical ability Karna mentioned was the remote virtual screen. It seemed that many servants were interested in this kind of magic. This magician is right, we do seem to be too relaxed. Of course, Karna had always been a steady person. He was just Wuming and Gadatsi. Mashu also had a dignified look on her face, so she wasn't any worse than Karna. Senpai, I think the doctor is right. We really do look a little relaxed. Matthew whispered. You're right. Ahaha. Gadatsi smiled awkwardly. However, Wuming shook his head. The fact that Tachika doesn't have any psychological pressure is the best support for us. So it's not wrong to relax a little. Even though Gadatsi basically didn't have the ability to provide support. Plus, we look very relaxed, but haven't you noticed that the ghosts that were supposed to be attacking us are all gone? After repelling Ibaraki Boy, there were no more ghosts that came to attack Wuming's group. It seems that they don't think it's going to work no matter how many ghosts they send, Karna analyzed. However, compared to them not coming down to die, I'm more inclined to believe that those ghosts have all disappeared. Why do you say that? Gadatsi questioned Wuming's words. Yes, it's time for the genius. Suddenly, a Mona Lisa appeared beside Wuming and the others. Wuming had seen Da Vinci before, but Karna hadn't. Therefore, he was quite interested in this newcomer. Karna narrowed his eyes. He could feel that this was a servant. Da Vinci's servant? Matthew said with some confusion. Yes, it's the genius, Matthew. Roman went to the toilet. Da Vinci looked at Matthew with a smile, then began to explain. Although it's strange, the detector on my side has clearly detected that something is amiss ahead. The ahead mentioned by Da Vinci was a place like a cliff in front of them. Da Vinci's servant. But there's nothing in front? Gadatsi was also very puzzled. I forgot to mention this, Matthew. We can say that we have arrived in Denver. With that, Wuming walked toward the cliff. Gadatsi and the others also followed. The place where Gadatsi was located was not a cliff, but rather a flat area at the bottom of the mountain. Of course, even so, its average altitude was still 1,600 meters above sea level. A huge fortress similar to a Japanese-style ancient city is located below. That is the city of Denver. It can be said that the city of Denver is at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. I was a little worried about what to do if there was a mudslide or something. After the improvement of the genius, Chaldea's instrument has adapted to the high magic density environment. There should have been a lot of life in front of us, but after you defeated Ibaraki Boy, all those lives disappeared. Although Chaldea's instrument is used to detect magic, the magic in this world is transformed by life, so it can also detect magic. Anyway, whether they were killed or used as sacrifices, most of the ghosts in the strange city of Denver have disappeared. That is to say, the remaining magic waves belong to the servants, right? Wuming asked. That's right. This is a battle between heroes without their servants. Anyway, only you and Karna can participate in the battle. Matthew still has to protect Tachika. So that's it. I still have to continue improving the instrument here. Good luck, Tachika. After that, Da Vinci cut off the communication. As expected of Da Vinci's kin, as always, he feels reliable. Gadatsi smiled awkwardly. Obviously, reliable was a derogatory term. Don't worry. I think she probably thinks that Karna and I are here, so Da Vinci can rest assured that we will protect you. You should know that both Karna and I are not simple people. Wuming comforted. Let me say something first. Karna raised his hand. I don't have the ability to protect others. This armor is the only thing that can protect others. However, because Sadrik and I are the only combatants here, I can't easily hand over the armor to you. After all, if Karna had given his armor to Gadatsi, then he would have been much weaker than Gadatsi. After all, not only did he have to release the fatal sunwheel, but he also had to give up the golden armor to Vasvi Shakti. Without the golden armor, Karna would no longer be the invincible Karna he used to be. At that time, he would have to be like an ordinary warrior and not let himself get hurt easily. Because without the golden armor, Karna was neither invincible nor able to recover from his injuries, nor could he use the essence of the sun to heal the foreign objects in his body, so he was much weaker. You don't have to worry about that at all. Matthew is very reliable. Gadatsi said to Karna with a smile. As she spoke, she gave Matthew a thumbs up, which made Matthew's face instantly turn red. However, Matthew did not hesitate to protect Gadatsi. I won't let any senior come to any harm. Looking at Matthew's determined and powerful eyes, both Wuming and Karna smiled with relief. "It's your blessing to have such a servant, master." Karna chuckled. The praise made Matthew's face turn red again. And Gudatsi looked at Matthew happily. "Because Matthew is my lovely junior," Gudatsi hugged Matthew as she spoke. Senpai. Wait a minute." Mashu, who was being held, could only struggle weakly. "In that case, I'll lead the way first." Wuming nodded to Karna, Gudatsi, and Matthew, then stood at the side of the mountain. Mythical Yggdrasil. Chapter 508. Even Wuming knew that a town could not be built directly at the foot of a mountain, so Wuming did not think that others did not know about this problem. Moreover, the Denver city in front of him was completely built in Japanese style, and it was a huge city. It did not look like an ordinary city in this era. This was undoubtedly the trump card of a servant, a noble phantasm. Therefore, the way Wuming chose to open the way was definitely different from the usual way. Facing the Japanese city of mysteries, which only had a few servants left, Wuming's way of opening the way was to directly blast open the gate with his noble phantasm. With the release of his noble phantasm, Wuming was not in a hurry to throw out the holy spear. Instead, he held it with both hands and kept it hidden, constantly gathering mana and holy light. This huge amount of mana. Karna was a little shocked. This amount of mana was already comparable to all the mana of a first-class servant, and it was even slightly more than that. Moreover, at this moment, Wuming's attack was still enough to compete with Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, in terms of explosive power. The reason why they only competed in terms of explosive power was because Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, was an extremely special noble phantasm. It did not mean that it was only effective against gods, but it had an additional effect on gods. Moreover, if Karna released his noble phantasm and did not release it, he was afraid that his solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, would be enough to overpower Wuming's attack. However, this was a joke. How could anyone let their enemy charge their noble phantasm? However, Wuming had been charging for so long, and no one came out to stop him. It seemed that his opponent really did let Wuming do whatever he wanted. He really did not know what his opponent was thinking. Karna was a little helpless, but he did not expect anyone to stop Wuming. He was just disappointed in his enemy. But then again, would the Japanese city be able to defend against Wuming's relic? Anyway, they would find out soon. Karna was looking forward to seeing how Wuming would complete the relic's relic. After all, if the noble phantasm was to explode here, he would be able to survive with his golden armor. However, Matthew would not be able to protect Gudatsi, as he would not be able to activate his noble phantasm in time. Gudatsi would definitely be blown to smithereens. Just as Karna was about to take off his golden armor and put it on Gudatsi, Wuming finally moved. Wuming raised the shrunken version of the holy spear in his hand, which was white on the outside and black on the inside, in front of him. This was the effect of the holy spear being compressed to the extreme. It was so white that it was black, and it had shrunk to the extreme. The reason why he did not throw it on his shoulder like a javelin was that Wuming was not sure that he could control the holy spear that was about to explode in his hand. Therefore, Wuming put the holy spear in front of his chest as if he was holding a ceremony. Then, Wuming recited the oath. The next attack is the real legend. Accept the judgment. Because the name of the relic had already been recited, there was no need to release the real name again. Then, Wuming threw the holy spear into the sky. The holy spear, which was so white that it was almost black, penetrated the clouds. It was like some kind of attack that fell from the sky, and it flew away without a trace. Then, like a divine punishment, the sky and earth changed color. In the sky above the Japanese city of mysteries, black clouds were constantly rotating with faint thunder and lightning. The vortex in the middle began to shine like hidden thunder, which made people frown. Gudatsi and Matthew looked at this scene, and were both stunned. This was a lot more than the previous battle. Of course, the servants in this Japanese city of mysteries must have noticed it too. Then Wuming snapped his fingers. Pa! In an instant, white light covered the entire land. After some time, Gudatsi opened her eyes. She rubbed her eyes that were uncomfortable because of the sudden strong light. Then Gudatsi began to look around. Matthew was holding a shield to protect Gadotsi, while Karna was in front of Matthew, using his body as a shield. Matthew did it subconsciously. He did not know that Wuming had calculated the range of the attack, and he did not know that the damage of the relic would not affect here. However, some of the wind swept over. That was why Karna chose to stay in front of Matthew and Gadotsi, when he knew that there would be no actual harm. This move is too cruel. Gadotsi held back for a long time, and that was all she could say. Karna nodded. Wuming's move was comparable to his Godslayer spear. It was quite destructive. However, Wuming waved his hand calmly. After all, no one came out to disturb me. This is a rare opportunity. If I don't accumulate more mana, wouldn't I be sorry? That was the terrifying thing about Wuming's spiritual base. It did not seem to be too powerful, and it felt no different from the previous servants' bodies. However, that was not the case. The interior of this spiritual base had been carefully modified by Wuming, and the modification took place in the root. It could be said that if Wuming wanted to, he only needed to accumulate power for a day and a night, and then use the relic to self-destruct. Then the American continent, which was the singularity, would disappear. Wuming completely removed the restrictions of the spiritual base in the root. In other words, as long as it was an attack that could be achieved in theory, Wuming could do it now. Just like the self-destruct of the American continent mentioned earlier, if there was enough mana and he could control it, Wuming was fully capable of destroying the singularity. Wuming's cheating method was not what it looked like on the surface. Of course, part of the power provided by the Holy Grail was also part of it. Although the Holy Grail had always seemed useless, it was something that the Magic King used to confuse people. How could it be so simple? After Chaldea recovered the Holy Grail, he also nervously protected it. Da Vinci also studied it very carefully. Naturally, the Holy Grail could not be underestimated. Of course, Wuming was here to save the singularity, not to destroy it, so he would not blow up the American continent. Gadotsi and Matthew, who had just come to their senses, smiled awkwardly after hearing Wuming's words. Moreover, don't underestimate this city. Although it didn't completely block it, it can still be considered to have blocked my noble artifact. Wuming's words stunned Gadotsi, Matthew, and Karna. Gadotsi and Matthew were surprised that the other party could actually block such a terrifying relic, while Karna was surprised that there was a city that could block a relic that was comparable to his Godslayer spear. With this thought in mind, the three of them looked at the Japanese-style city below. The originally gorgeous and dignified city had been damaged as if it had experienced a natural disaster. The outer city towers had basically collapsed, and the various pavilions and houses inside were almost completely destroyed. The entire city could be said to be in a sorry state. Only the palace-like hall in the center was still intact, but it had lost its previous gorgeous and dignified aura and color, giving a feeling that it had lost its power. Let's go. My relic only destroyed the other party's relic. I'm afraid the servants on the other side did not suffer any damage. After Wuming finished speaking, Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other and nodded encouragingly. Then, let's take the Holy Grail here today. In this way, the four of them moved toward the dilapidated city. Chapter 509. Because the distance was very close, the four of them only took a few minutes to reach the gate of the city. Looking at Gadotsi, who was still trying to figure out how to contact Roman, Wuming smiled helplessly. Because of Wuming's noble phantasm, the communication device that had been repaired was destroyed again. Because Da Vinci modified the communication device to adapt to the situation of high magic concentration, Wuming directly used super magic explosion on her, and directly cut off the communication system. It was estimated that if they wanted to contact each other again, Da Vinci would have to further modify the device, at least to adapt it to the magic concentration of Kanzaki's atmosphere. No longer paying attention to Gadotsi, Wuming looked at the half-destroyed door and said thoughtfully, "To be able to do this, I'm afraid the other party used the Holy Grail." Karna nodded after seeing the situation. "I'm afraid that's the case, otherwise I really can't think of any defense that can block such a catastrophic attack." However, Wuming smiled slightly. He really did know of a noble phantasm that could defend against any kind of damage. King Arthur's scabbard Avalon. As someone who was familiar with the story of King Arthur, and had accompanied King Arthur for half of his life, Wyrm naturally understood the power of Avalon. True name liberation could produce an unparalleled defensive barrier that was like a layer of scales, and even the good separation sword might not be able to break it. And Avalon could also make the wearer never get hurt, and it was in a semi-invincible state. Wyrm knew that Avalon would be accidentally lost, but because Wyrm thought that Artoria needed Avalon more, he had always asked Artoria to carry it with her. Anyway, Avalon was not lost until Wyrm left by himself, but from the ending, Avalon was still lost. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens. Damn it. If it weren't for the fact that Wyrm had played his part being a knight, how could Morgan Le Fay have been tricked by him? In a direct confrontation, Morgan Le Fay wouldn't have been able to defeat Wyrm. Moreover, if Wyrm's main body had appeared at that time, he would have been able to crush Morgan Le Fay with his little finger. Moreover, he wouldn't have needed any reason to do so. After all, if you provoked the origin dragon, would it need a reason to crush you? Of course not. The more Wyrm thought about it, the angrier he got. He quickly took a deep breath and stopped thinking about it. Phew, Karna looked at Wyrm in confusion, but didn't say anything. Ahem. Let's go in. Wyrm coughed and walked toward the door. As soon as they entered the city gate, Wyrm realized that something was wrong. He immediately waved for Gadotsi to stop. The air here is highly toxic. Then he immediately covered himself with magic power. Wyrm realized that not only the air, but even the ground under his feet was full of poison. Strangely, the poison didn't spread outside. It was as if the city was an inherent enchantment filled with poison. Wyrm himself wasn't very afraid of poison. However, the poison this time was a little different. Therefore, Wyrm didn't dare to be careless. Sizzle. Although Wyrm covered himself with a magic power shield, the poison in the air had begun to corrode Wyrm's outer appearance. This poison is a little too strong. Wyrm increased the magic power output of his magic power shield. Then I can't go in? Gadotsi was a little disappointed. Wyrm looked at Gadotsi awkwardly. Do you really think this is a tourist attraction? Now, it's time for me to take action, Karna said. After all, Wyrm had invited him to deal with the poison. Karna walked through the gate and waved his spear. The true sunfire burst out of his body and began to burn the poison. The ground was penetrated by Karna's flames and gradually turned red, as if lava was about to erupt. The air was also covered and burned by Karna's flames. It's really working, Matthew said excitedly. However, Karna and Wyrm didn't look very happy, because both Wyrm and Karna could feel that the burned area was filled with poison again. This poison seemed to be inexhaustible. Even if one area was burned, the poison in other areas would fill in. Even the poison that filled in made Karna's flames burn more vigorously. Smelling the intoxicating smell in the air, Wyrm said without hesitation, "This place is filled with the poison of fine wine. It's probably Shitendaji." As Karna burned, more and more wine fragrance came from the air. Cough, cough. Cough, cough, cough. Matthew began to cough. Matthew, are you okay? Gadotsi looked at Matthew worriedly. Matthew's face was purple. There was no doubt that he was poisoned. Wyrm took out a bottle of potion from his golden ripple and threw it into Gadotsi's hand. It seems that Shitendaji's poison has begun to spread. Matthew is poisoned. This is the antidote. Give it to Matthew. After hearing Wyrm's words, Gadotsi hurriedly uncorked the potion bottle and carefully helped Matthew drink the potion. After drinking the potion, Matthew's complexion immediately improved. It had to be said that the game's products were all excellent. Detoxification was like a rule. Because of the characteristics of the antidote, Matthew was no longer poisoned. Thank you very much, Senpai Cylinder. Matthew thanked Wyrm. Hearing such solemn words, Wyrm seemed to see Galahad. Compared to Cylinder, I prefer you to call me by my other name. Matthew looked at Wyrm in confusion. I'm kidding. Matthew, just be Matthew. The rest is just a matter of people abandoned by time. Don't worry about it. To be honest, if Matthew really copied Galahad's words, Wyrm would not be very happy. After all, Being himself was the most important thing. Then, without waiting for Matthew to respond to Wu Ming's words, Wu Ming took out a few bottles of potions from his golden ripples and threw them to Matthew and Gadotsi. Tachika, you and Matthew take these bottles of antidote and immediately return to the place where we were just now. The poison here will spread soon. It's not safe. Leave it to me and Karna, Wu Ming said solemnly. Okay, I got it. Gadotsi also answered Wu Ming seriously. She also knew the seriousness of the matter. Just the spread of the poison was enough to poison Matthew. She was afraid that it would be very dangerous inside. As a qualified master, Gadotsi made a gesture of complete trust in his servant. Then I'll leave it to you. Selender, Karna, I need you to tell me the story of what will happen here. Gadotsi smiled at the two people who were already standing in the poison area. No problem. Understood, master, Wu Ming and Karna said without hesitation. Then Gadotsi and Matthew, who had recovered, began to run away from the poison area. Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi's figure and touched his chin thoughtfully. It seemed that Tachika's poison resistance was not that simple. In this case, he did not have to worry about her safety. As for Matthew, he would be fine with a few bottles of antidote. Relieved, Wu Ming looked at Karna. How is it? You should be fine, right? Karna seemed to be verifying something, and flames burst out of his body. Although I can't completely burn these poisons, they can't hurt me either. The son of the sun god was not just for show. Then let's go and find out the truth of all this. Chapter 510. This poison that defied common sense was able to block Wu Ming's precious artifact. They were clearly a power, yet they knew their place. This was what they were currently puzzled about. However, there was a more important point. They had to retrieve the Holy Grail and save this era. Therefore, it would be best if they could retrieve the Holy Grail without bloodshed and without any casualties on either side. However, from Lulu's previous attack and the current poison, it was clear that the other side had no intention of making peace. It could only be said that the heroic spirits were a group of super problematic characters who were bored in the heroic spirit palace. The reason why heroic spirits were called heroes or anti-heroes was that they were different from ordinary people. And these differences had long since established their identities as problematic characters. If they met someone they liked, the other party would instantly become brothers with them. However, if they didn't like the other party, they wouldn't need any fancy reasons. Just the simple reason of not liking the other party was enough to make them fight. However, it was precisely because of this casual nature that these heroes became heroic spirits. It was also because of the personalities of heroic spirits that Gadotsi didn't show any fear on this journey to save humanity. After all, Gadotsi held the fate of humanity in her hands. However, Gadotsi wouldn't complain or be afraid because she had Matthew by her side, a companion full of personalities on the road. Cough cough. However, it was also because some heroic spirits were too individualistic that they stood on the opposite side of reason. At least, that was the case for now. Just like the female high school student in front of Wu Ming and Karna. Next, this road is blocked, Lulu said to Wu Ming and Karna kindly. Although she was also in this poisonous area, for some reason, she wasn't affected by the poison at all. As if she had guessed Wu Ming and Karna's thoughts, Lulu waved her hand and began to explain. Of course, Shitendaji's poison is very strong, and it doesn't differentiate between friend and foe. I am also affected here. Of course, Wu Ming really didn't want to know. Then Lulu's body slightly emitted a trace of magic, and a faint golden light attached to her body. It's all thanks to the Holy Grail. Holy Grail, Wu Ming could more or less guess what was going on. After coming into contact with the Holy Grail, he had temporarily gained immunity to Shitendaji's poison. Okay, then I'll leave this holy maiden, who also has divinity like you, to you, Karna. After Karna nodded, Wu Ming changed direction and continued to walk toward the central hall. No, wait a minute. Why did you leave just like that? Ling Lu Guzan felt helpless when he saw Wu Ming leave without paying attention to him. Whoosh! With the sound of the wind, Lulu dodged the spear Karna, who was rushing to attack. You to me, Karna, you to attack, Lulu's is to me. Lulu's to say Karna, Lulu to attack. To kills to hit full, you attack. Since you're an enemy, then let's fight. Karna, who had transformed into an aloof Adonis, didn't say anything else and swung his spear at Lulu again. Bang! A samurai sword emitting a golden and silver glow blocked Karna's spear. Lulu took out the Samantabhadra wisdom sword from somewhere and blocked Karna's attack. Since the Samantabhadra had already appeared, the Samantabhadra naturally appeared as well. A samurai sword emitting a golden glow floated in the sky. It was the Samantabhadra. The Samantabhadra split from 1 to 2, 2 to 4 and 4 to 8. In just a few seconds, it had split into hundreds of Samantabhadra. Then I'm going to get serious too. Take this attack, demigod hero of India. Ling Lu's previous carelessness was replaced by a solemn expression. Tanky aim, heavenly phantom rain. In an instant, hundreds of Samantabhadra fell directly in front of Karna and Lulu, causing a violent explosion. Boom, boom, boom. In front of him, Wuming heard the explosion behind him and glanced sideways. You should have no problem dealing with Lulu, right? Good luck, Karna. With that, Wuming sped up and ran toward the central hall. When he was almost at the front of the hall, a woman in a gorgeous blue dress that resembled a witch's costume appeared in front of Wuming, half kneeling. She had the same fox ears and tail as Lulu, but the fox in front of Wuming looked a little like a wife. However, if Wuming wasn't mistaken, she had 6 tails behind her. Although the fox looked weak, it had a lot of magic power in its body. Moreover, she had a golden glow on her body. There was no doubt that she had come into contact with the Holy Grail and obtained a temporary immunity. A second fox, in addition to your rather strong magic power, based on my guess, you should be one of the 3 great demons along with Shitendaji and Daitengu, Tamamo no Mae. However, from what I know, Tamamo no Mae should have 9 tails, but you actually only have 6. Saying so, Wuming looks towards the fox spirit who is standing in front of the main hall. To be honest, other than Tamamo no Mae, Wuming couldn't think of anyone else who could have a fox spirit that was on par with Lulu. Although he was curious why she was half kneeling. Yes, I've been waiting for you for a long time, Sarandasama. As for the number of tails, it's only because I haven't recovered my strength. Tamamo no Mae easily admitted her identity. Tamamo no Mae seemed to be in a good mood. The 6 tails behind her swayed, and her body emitted a trace of mana. Wuming frowned slightly and said, "This familiar mana. I'm afraid you're the one who saved Ibaraki Duji." Wuming felt this magic power. It was the same magic power that appeared on the talisman paper in front of Ibaraki Boy. Yes, you're right, Sarandasama. Tamamo no Mae said with a smile. He felt that this woman was getting stranger. Wuming pondered. Then if you can step aside, I think we can continue to talk like this. Although Wuming didn't think that she would easily step aside. After all, she was one of the 3 great monsters of Japan, the white-faced golden 9-tailed fox. Moreover, it was said that Tamamo no Mae was actually the incarnation of the Japanese sun god, Amaterasu. Those who were related to gods were not to be trifled with. Take Ling Lu Guzan for example. Don't be fooled by her abnormal appearance. She was not someone to be trifled with. Wuming didn't think that she was a simple servant who could successfully ambush his group and survive after being blown up by his noble phantasm. At the very least, this Tamamo no Mae and Lulu Guzan weren't as simple as they looked. After all, the most important point was that Wuming never told Tamamo no Mae that his name was Sarandar. She must have learned about Wuming's information through some means. Wuming judged. Fortunately, she didn't know Wuming's name as the Root Dragon. Otherwise, Wuming would really be shocked. Then, just as Wuming was about to make the first move, Tamamo no Mae spoke. Her words shocked him from another perspective. Of course, Sarandasama. Then Wuming looked at Tamamo no Mae with a strange and unbelievable look. Did Shitendaji know that you betrayed him? You may not know, but Shitendaji has left this hall. Wuming was taken aback. She left here, how rare. Wuming instantly thought of a possibility. Yes, it's what you think. Tamamo no Mae said instantly. Wuming didn't enter the hall. Instead, he immediately turned around and prepared to leave. However, as if he thought of something again, Wuming stopped and turned to look at Tamamo no Mae. I have a question. Why did you tell me this news? Tamamonome seemed to have heard the question she wanted to ask, and there was a smile on the corner of her mouth. Because I want to marry you, Wuming-sama. In an instant, Wuming's eyes widened. Chapter 511. Wuming's eyes widened, showing that his heart was not calm. After Wuming finished releasing his noble phantasm, the sky had become cloudless. Wuming's eyes sharpened as he was drenched in the sudden rain of the sun. Wuming suddenly appeared in front of Tamamonome. Wuming stretched out his hand and directly grabbed Tamamonome's white neck. However, the magical power attached to Wuming's hand that was holding Tamamonome's neck showed that Wuming was not joking. Even if she was a servant, she would not be able to survive if her neck was broken. How did you know this name? Wuming's tone had a hint of murderous intent. That's right, Wuming was not surprised that she wanted to marry him, although he was a little bit concerned about it. Cough cough. Wuming was surprised that she knew his name Wuming. Even among the people who knew him, there were only a few people who knew his name Wuming. In addition, the 3 extra holy grails at this singularity were arranged by the Magic King. Wuming had to guess whether Tamamonome knew his name because of the Magic King. Or perhaps, Tamamonome was simply a thug sent by the Magic King to deal with Wuming. At this moment, Wuming's mental power was completely released, and the range of thousands of meters had entered Wuming's perception range. Wuming's mental power was not only used to detect whether there were other enemies or traps around, but also to see if he had fallen into his opponent's illusion. Although Wuming could be said to be immune to illusion, Wuming was only immune to his own illusion. If it was not used on Wuming himself, but used to change the surrounding environment, Wuming might still fall into the trap if he was not aware of it. To make a simple analogy, if you put an illusion on a stone, in theory, let the stone think that it was a flower, then the stone would think that it was a flower, and then with the help of magical power, it would make people see that there was a flower in the original position of the stone. It was similar to a simple magic trick. However, now that Wuming had completely released his mental power, he did not have to worry. The other party did not play any tricks. I learned about your identity through touching the Holy Grail, Wuming-sama. Tamamonome did not care about Wuming strangling her neck, as if she trusted Wuming and smiled. Holy Grail. Hearing Tamamonome's words, Wuming thought of such an example, but the other party did not come into contact with the Holy Grail, but with him. Back in Winterwood City, Stheno, the eldest of the 3 Gorgon goddesses, obediently submitted to Wuming because she came into contact with Wuming and learned of his identity. Strictly speaking, Stheno had the divinity of the Earth Mother, and Tamamonome also had an extremely close relationship with Amaterasu Amakami. If Tamamonome learned of Wuming's identity because she came into contact with the Holy Grail, it would not be unreasonable. Compared to Stheno, who came into contact with him and learned of his information, Wuming felt that it was more reasonable for Tamamonome to learn of his information because she came into contact with the Holy Grail. Although Wuming didn't have the same knowledge as Karna, he also monitored Tamamonome's every move, including a series of details such as breathing, every hair moved by the wind, and so on. In addition, Wuming found that there was indeed no other servant-level magic power in this hall, except for the servant-level magic power in front of him. There was no doubt that Tamamonome did not lie. Wuming slowly loosened his hand holding Tamamonome's neck, and looked at Tamamonome deeply. I still can't completely believe you. If you want to prove yourself, then you have to stay here. If I find you elsewhere, I will immediately regard you as an enemy and kill you at all costs. How about it? After all, if the other party lied, then it was most likely the Magic King's trick. In that case, it was a risk to let Tamamonome stay here for a second. That was why Wuming said that he would kill Tamamonome at all costs. After hearing Wuming's words, Tamamonome nodded happily. There was no doubt that Tamamonome agreed. No problem, I will wait here for my husband to come back and pick me up. I wish my husband good luck. With that, Tamamonome bent her upper body, folded her hands, and lay on the ground like a Japanese woman saluting her husband. Facing Tamamonome calling him husband, Wuming frowned. This is only the first time we've met. You've only learned about me from the Holy Grail, and you've already taken the liberty to say that you want to marry me. I will definitely reject such shallow love. Don't call me husband anymore. Marriage without love is meaningless in Wu Ming's view. Wu Ming is not a man who can't walk away when he sees a beautiful woman, and he won't readily agree just because the other party is throwing herself at him. After all, Wu Ming still has a few love debts. How can he add one more? Yes, I understand, Selen-sama. This time, Wu Ming nodded with satisfaction. She didn't call him Wu Ming but Selen-sama. This means that she is a smart person. Wu Ming likes to deal with smart people. Then, you can stay here. You didn't lie. I will come back and thank you. With that, Wu Ming immediately turned and left. I wish you good luck. After Wu Ming's figure disappeared, Tamamonome smiled again. Hehe, such an excellent husband will be taken away by others if I don't hurry. I am the Tamamonome who wants to be a virtuous wife, and I have already given you a greeting gift, my husband. Although she said that, Tamamonome's eyes were a bit scary. Unfortunately, Wu Ming had already left and didn't see this scene. On the way back to the city gate, Wu Ming began to think about the information he collected so far. According to Tamamonome's information, as well as Wu Ming's own investigation, Shitendaji was no longer in the central hall. There were two reasons why Shitendaji set up this poison city. First, she needed to make Wu Ming think that she was in the center of the poison city. After all, if they were to fight, Shitendaji's domain would be very advantageous. However, Wu Ming forgot that last time. Even after Shitendaji left, her noble artifact could still operate on its own. This time, it might be the same. Then, why did this self-operating poison city attract Wu Ming? Naturally, it was to let Shitendaji escape. This was also the second reason. The entire place was filled with magic filled with poison. Under normal circumstances, Wu Ming wouldn't be able to detect small magic movements. This way, it was very likely that Shitendaji had already escaped from the city. From Wu Ming's point of view, Shitendaji wasn't a demon who would run away before a fight even started. Not to mention, Ibaraki Duji was still here. And even if Shitendaji left, where could she go? There was only one answer, which was to find Gadatsi and Matthew outside the city. Although Shitendaji wouldn't run away because of fear, he wasn't an idiot either. He wouldn't just sit there and wait for an enemy that he couldn't defeat to find trouble with him. Thus, the wisest choice was to lead the main force away and ambush the enemy's weak point. And what if Shitendaji was the follower sent by the Magic King? Gadatsi was the only hope for humanity, at least for now. Then, as long as he eliminated Gadatsi, the Magic King wouldn't have any worries. As for why Shitendaji was so sure that only Wu Ming and Karna would come in, it could only be said that this was very likely a part of the plan. Wu Ming guessed that even if Gadatsi and Matthew came in, Shitendaji probably had a way to separate them. As expected of the leader of the Great Mountains, the son of the great god Ibaraki, his brain isn't any worse than a human's. Humans didn't have power, so they honed their intelligence. Demons had power, so they abandoned their intelligence. And as the son of the demon god, Shitendaji was very smart. Now there was someone in front of him who was stalling for time. Shitendaji told me that even if I die today, I'll drag you here. Chapter 512. Ibaraki Duji said domineeringly to Wu Ming. The bone sword in his hand was faintly discernible. Although he couldn't tell if Ibaraki Duji was also immune to the Holy Grail, he was able to walk through the poison, as if it didn't exist. But then again, since he lived so close to Shitendaji all year round and wasn't poisoned, he should have some sort of immunity. Who cares? There was one thing that was without a doubt. Ibaraki Duji was sent by Shitendaji to stop Wu Ming. You're quite well-mannered, Ibaraki. Wu Ming greeted Ibaraki Duji. Waha, it's alright, after all, I have something like the Holy Grail. Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk shut up. You and I aren't close enough to greet each other. Ibaraki Duji laughed, but then realized that this was an enemy, so he quickly changed his attitude. No matter how he looked at it, Ibaraki Duji seemed unreliable, but no matter what, he was still the well-known Rashomon ghost, Ibaraki Duji. If that's the case, then Shitendaji must have gone to find Karna, Silent said calmly. Shitendaji is obviously looking for that human girl. Why would he go find that terrifying son? Asterisk cough cough asterisk of course. It's not that Shitendaji is afraid of that guy. It's just that there's no need to understand. The sun was obviously referring to Karna. Like a child, Ibaraki Duji was trying very hard to protect Shitendaji. Is that so? Thank you, Ibaraki Duji. Wuming smiled lightly. Now he was sure of Shitendaji's whereabouts. On the other hand, Shitendaji, who heard Wuming's thanks, had a strange expression. Forget it, I don't care what you're saying. If it wasn't for that sun, how could I have escaped so pathetically? Asterisk cough cough asterisk retreat. And I was even mocked by that sun fox, damn it. Ibaraki Duji didn't realize that he had fallen into Wuming's trap, and was still throwing a tantrum. Sure enough, anything related to the sun isn't a good thing. You too. Today let me, Ibaraki Dojo, end your light. With a roar, Ibaraki Dojo's left hand stabbed the bone blade into the ground, then raised his right hand and aimed at Wuming. Thou must experience the true appearance of us ghosts. His right arm, which had been severed by a treacherous scheme and then regained after losing it, had turned into a freak. Let's go hellfire. In an instant, Ibaraki Kido's right hand burned with a strange flame. It turned out that the reason why the servants liked to chant before releasing their noble phantoms was to strengthen their noble phantoms. Of course, there was also a saying that it was more handsome. Asterisk cough asterisk. Just as Wuming was about to release his noble artifact to receive the attack, Wuming realized that Ibaraki boy had not fully released his noble artifact. It's not over yet. Ibaraki Kido's left hand moved away from the bone sword and placed it on his right hand. There's more than just this amount of karmic fire. Let the karmic fire of the great mountains burn. In an instant, the flame on Ibaraki Kido's right arm skyrocketed, showing an extreme golden color. Ibaraki Dojo's body was completely engulfed in flames. The only thing that could be seen was that red to the point of gold, and then gold to the point of blackening. This time, Wuming did not dare to be careless. It was obvious that his opponent had combined two noble phantoms into one. Moreover, in Wuming's perception, Wuming clearly noticed that Ibaraki Kido's spiritual base was gradually collapsing. There was no doubt that this was the last noble phantoms of the fused life. Dual noble phantoms coupled with the burning of life. This was the degree of 1 + 1 + 1 greater than 3. The power was much stronger than the previous military noble phantoms, and it was comparable to the holy sword. In short, Wuming did not have the confidence to block Ibaraki Kido's double noble phantoms that sacrificed his life. However, Ibaraki Kido's action of burning life touched Wuming's heart. Wuming remembered what Ibaraki Kido had said before. Even if I die today, I will drag you here with me. Those who could become heroic spirits were all heroes without exception. However, the reason why anti-heroes could become heroic spirits and enter the martyr's palace was because of their merits. Entering the martyr's palace after death was not only a comfort of losing one's freedom, but also a recognition of two great restraints. Wuming was deeply touched by Ibaraki Kido's spirit of sacrificing himself for Shitendaji, which went beyond friendship. Wuming smiled gratifyingly. Then, I'll properly receive your strongest attack, Ibaraki Kido. After saying that, the spear in Wuming's hand dissipated into mana. Wuming opened his arms, and the armor on his body was completely removed from Wuming's body. Wuming's noble phantoms were permanent noble phantoms, but it did not mean that they could not be released. Finally, the removed armor gathered in front of Wuming, constantly changing and combining. A holy knight's shield that was as tall as a person, similar to Matthew's shield, floated in front of Wuming. Wuming was dressed in white. He grabbed the handle behind the shield and placed it on the ground. This is my strongest noble phantoms, the proof of my identity as the strongest knight, Vilo-Silenced. It's a concept defensive noble phantoms. Ibaraki Kido did not release his noble phantoms. Instead, he quietly listened to Wuming's speech. Wuming did not know if Ibaraki Kido was still alive, as he could no longer sense his aura. Let me see if your feelings for Shitendaji, which surpasses friendship, can break this knight's proof and concept relic. Wuming's words were like an opportunity. After Wuming finished speaking, Ibaraki boy's final noble artifact was released. The black gold ghostly hand left Ibaraki boy. After it left, the ghostly hand continued to expand until it became incomparably huge. It was as if Ibaraki boy had really sacrificed his life. The final cry of the noble artifact sounded incomparably mournful in Wuming's ears. Gift mind Arthur, Arthur's gift armor. Wuming did not shout with all his might like Ibaraki Dojo. Instead, he was like a holy king, calmly and elegantly reading out the true name of the noble artifact. In an instant, the knight's shield that was as tall as a person shone brightly. There was nothing fancy about it. The knight's shield merely released a light film. The defensive wall formed by the light film started from the shield. The light film first enveloped Wuming, then it began to expand up, down, left, and right. It was like a giant shield of light that was constantly expanding. When the ghostly hand approached Wuming, it had expanded to a height of 100 meters. It was like a monstrous devil's hand, trying to grab Wuming. The defensive wall in front of Wuming seemed to be responding to Ibaraki boy's noble artifact. It expanded to the same width and height as the black gold ghostly hand. In the next second, the giant ghostly hand and the defensive light film came into contact. Rumble! In front of the central hall, Tamamonome was still half kneeling in front of the hall, looking at the nuclear explosion that happened not far away. Because of Wuming's defensive light film, the impact of the explosion did not spread to her. Even the sound of the explosion did not reach her. Before Wuming and Ibaraki boy released their noble artifacts, Tamamonome had already noticed that something was wrong. The magical waves were too strong. She saw with her own eyes that a giant ghostly hand that was constantly expanding collided with the defensive light film. She had witnessed this miracle. Sometimes, I'm really jealous of Shitendaji. Tamamonome shook her head as if she was feeling sorry for Ibaraki boy. Then she closed her eyes and fell into silence. After all, Wuming's request was not to move. Tamamonome chose to meditate. On the other hand, Karna and Suzaku Misaki were affected by the explosion. Suzaku Misaki was blown to the side. Karna tried his best to stabilize himself and looked at the explosion. Is this Cylinder's doing? Then I should end this quickly. Outside the city, Godatsi stood behind Matthew. She was shocked by the huge explosion in the city. Matthew did not have the time to care about the explosion in the city. Instead, he focused on Shitendaji in front of him. However, Shitendaji was not paying attention to Matthew and Godatsi. Instead, he was looking at the explosion. She could sense that it was Ibaraki boy's noble artifact. Hee as expected, Ibaraki, you're an idiot. Chapter 5:13. Although Shitendaji was smiling, his smile wasn't sincere. On the contrary, there was a hint of pain in his smile, but Shitendaji managed to cover it up. She did tell Ibaraki to try his best to stop Wuming, but she didn't tell him to risk his life. Shitendaji liked to tease Ibaraki Duji, but that was also a kind of love. Ibaraki knew this, so he tried to delay Wuming. For the sake of Shitendaji, Ibaraki sacrificed himself. Although they were both servants, it wasn't easy to meet a close friend. Moreover, servants could be said to have a second life. To be able to meet a close friend in a second life, Shitendaji was very happy. He opened his wine gourd, smiled and took a sip. Shitendaji no longer paid attention to the explosion. Then let's continue. I'm looking forward to seeing if the little girl can block my poison hee. Matthew clenched his teeth with a bitter expression. This time it's really bad. At this time, a white angel walked out from the side. In the center of the explosion, where Wuming was. Wuming didn't hear any sound and he didn't see any color other than white. The light membrane calculated the explosion from the collision of the noble phantasm as damage, and the dazzling light from the noble phantasm as damage. Therefore, Wuming's noble phantasm isolated the sound and scene. That was why Wuming could only see white and couldn't hear the explosion. However, one thing was certain. Wuming successfully defended against Ibaraki Duji's noble phantasm. Because Wuming's noble phantasm wasn't destroyed, Wuming didn't die was the best proof. However, this was how it should be. It's such a pity, Ibaraki Duji. The concept noble phantasm under the time paradox can't be destroyed by flames comparable to the sacred sword. This was Wuming's biggest cheat. After leaving Connaught, Wuming accidentally obtained a set of worn-out armor. Because of a magic scroll, he came to Camelo. And that set of armor became Wuming's armor as a Knight of the Round Table. After Wuming left, Artoria took it back and no one knew where it went. Connaught's timeline was the 5th century BC, while Camelot's timeline was the 5th century AD. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a problem for Wuming to bring the armor to the future. However, the problem lay with the scroll. The scroll that Merlin used to summon him was undoubtedly made by Wuming. He could see that, but the scroll appeared thousands of years ago without any trace. If there was no problem with it, Wuming wouldn't believe it. There was no doubt that this was a problem with the scroll. Before he was summoned by Merlin with the scroll, Wuming had discovered the scroll that contained his own blood, and was completely made by himself. Assuming that after Wuming was summoned, Merlin used the scroll that was passed down in the past to summon Wuming. Then who made the scroll? Wuming didn't make it, but it was undoubtedly made by Wuming. Wuming had put the scroll in his own space, so the only possibility was the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay. Although the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay was similar to the one made by Wuming, it didn't have Wuming's blood. Assuming that Wuming in Camelot was codenamed Present Wuming, and Wuming in Connaught was Past Wuming, then there was an inference. After the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay in Camelot sucked the present Wuming away, it was also sucked into the space-time tunnel. There might have been a trace of blood on it. After entering the space-time tunnel, it went to the past and was found by the past Wuming. Then the past Wuming was sucked away. The scroll wasn't taken away by Wuming, but was passed down 1,000 years in the future, where it was used by Merlin, who then sucked the past Wuming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wuming was sucked away at the same time as Merlin sucked the Wuming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wuming was sucked away, and became the present Wuming. Wuming rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. Looks like I'll have to investigate this thoroughly after returning to the origin. It is still possible for the soundless in the Great Root to know such a thing. After all, administrators have to be good at using their authority. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Wuming only used a little bit of administrator authority. Through the power of the origin and the power of the Holy Grail held by Maeve, he cheated by recreating the armor that came with the time paradox. The strength of this armor was no doubt no weaker than Avalon's. Since it was made by the origin, it must be a masterpiece. While Wuming was thinking, the relic slowly came into contact with him. Since the danger was gone, it was naturally gone. After contact, the shield formed by the armor automatically disintegrated, turning into a new set of armor and attaching itself to Wuming's body. This time, the armor was even holier than before, as if the effect of the true name liberation was still there. Wuming touched the helmet. Due to the big explosion, he knew from the central hall that the city gate was no longer poisonous. Due to the influence of Ibaraki's karmic fire and Wuming's holy light, as well as the storm caused by the explosion, the poison in the soil and the poison in the air were all blown away, burned, and purified. Then Wuming looked at Ibaraki Dojo. At this moment, Ibaraki Dojo had completely disappeared. Only the place where Ibaraki Dojo used to be was left with a little bit of magic crystals. Regardless of whether the opponent was alive or dead, Ibaraki Dojo would not be able to survive the final blow of sacrificing his life. Shaking his head, Wuming stopped paying attention to this. Then he ran straight to the city gate. After all, there were no enemies blocking the way. Wuming ran straight to the city gate using the shortest route between 2 points. Near the city gate, Wuming ran into Karna. At this moment, Suzaku Guzan, who was opposite Karna, had disappeared. This meant that Karna had defeated Suzaku Guzan. As expected of Karna, you really won. However, in response to Wuming's compliment, Karna shook his head. My opponent went easy on me. This was a bit strange. However, since Karna said that his opponent had gone easy on him, then he must have gone easy on him. Karna would not lie. Let's not talk about this for now. Tachika is in danger. Shitendaji is going to look for her. Then, Wuming and Karna went to look for Gadatsi. On the way, Karna told Wuming about the battle between him and Suzaku Guzan. Suzaku Guzan's exquisite noble phantasm had indeed hit Karna, but it had not seriously injured him. After that, Karna had been fighting Suzaku Guzan in close combat. This was because Karna had discovered that Suzaku-Guzen's noble phantasm was based on telekinesis. Therefore, when fighting in close combat, Suzaku-Guzen would definitely be wary. In the beginning, because Suzaku-Guzen was fighting Karna in close combat, no matter how exquisite her control was, if Karna wanted to play tricks, it was very likely that a few katanas would rebound and hit Suzaku-Guzen. This was the disadvantage of being too close to the enemy. Karna had been affected by Wyrm and Ibaraki Doji's explosion, so he felt that he should end the battle quickly. Then, after releasing the noble phantasm, Suzaku-Guzen symbolically dodged and was hit. There was no doubt that Suzaku-Guzen had gone easy on him. Although he did not know why Suzaku-Guzen had gone easy on him, the outcome was good. Shitendaji was the only one missing. Then, when Wyrm and Karna found Gadatsi and Matthew, they found that Nightingale had appeared beside them at some point. Shitendaji, on the other hand, was drinking wine with a smile on his face. However, no matter how one looked at him, Shitendaji looked quite depressed. Chapter 5:14. When he saw that Gadatsi was fine, Wyrm was relieved. It was obvious that Shitendaji didn't attack Gadatsi because of Nightingale, who appeared out of nowhere. I've failed completely this time. I don't have a good relationship with this lady. Shitendaji seemed to have given up and said to Wyrm. Although Wyrm didn't understand Nightingale's ability, seeing that she was a nurse, he guessed that her noble phantasm should be something like healing or purification. And from Shitendaji's current expression, it could be seen that Nightingale's ability completely restrained her. That's true, Shitendaji. Wyrm was no longer anxious because there were only 2 servants left in the Nippon faction, and Tamamonome seemed to be on Wyrm's side. In fact, Wyrm's guess was correct. When Shitendaji used poison to attack Gadatsi and Matthew, Nightingale calmly walked out of the forest and released her noble phantasm. As a result, Shitendaji's poison was completely purified. At this moment, the wine that Shitendaji drank was poison-free. I have to say, Shitendaji is really unlucky when it comes to luck. Even Gadatsi couldn't help but ridicule. According to Gadatsi's judgment, Shitendaji spent a lot of effort to get out of Denver and attack her, the last master. But in the end, at the final moment, a servant that completely countered Shitendaji appeared out of nowhere. Just how unlucky was Seiji to meet such a servant? After all, Nightingale left in the middle of the night chasing after Achilles, who knew that he would meet her here. Well, actually, I've always been unlucky. Looking at the confident Shitendaji, Wyrm subconsciously felt that something was wrong. Wyrm knew just how dangerous Shitendaji was, so he chose to immediately attack Shitendaji. The holy spear pierced towards Shitendaji, but Shitendaji didn't try to defend or dodge. I remember that you are looking for the Holy Grail. Unfortunately, the Holy Grail is no longer in my hands. The holy spear stopped right before Shitendaji's neck. This is the second time we've met, Shitendaji, although I'm not sure if you still remember me. Although Wyrm spoke to Shitendaji, he still kept the holy spear at Shitendaji's neck. Of course I remember. I clearly remember that you chopped off my head, Shitendaji said in a satisfied tone. Not at all like he was being held captive. No matter if it's Ibaraki, Tamamonome, or even Suzaku-Guzen, the golden light on their bodies, as well as this continuous poison, were all created by me through the Holy Grail. Shitendaji said everything without hesitation. However, I didn't bring the Holy Grail with me. Shitendaji smiled. Then, if Shitendaji didn't bring the Holy Grail with him, where did he put it? The central hall had been infiltrated by his mental power, but there was no trace of the Holy Grail. Suzaku-Guzen and Ibaraki Doji had already left. Could it be Tamamonome? Wyrm fell into deep thought. Wyrm felt that he had overlooked something. Suddenly, Wyrm's pupils shrank as he thought of something. This city was undoubtedly a noble artifact, and it was one that had been blessed by the Holy Grail. Suzaku-Guzen didn't have such a legend. Although Ibaraki Doji and Shitendaji had said that they had built a city in the mountains, this city wasn't suitable for ghosts. As for Tamamonome, she didn't have any legends of a city. In that case, there must be a hidden follower, and this city must belong to that follower. Shitendaji seemed to have seen through Wyrm's thoughts and smiled. That's right, I gave the Holy Grail to the owner of this city after all. I didn't plan to go back, Shitendaji smiled. However, this smile was quite familiar to Wuming. It was the same smile that Shitendaji had before he left in the Winterwood City. Poochie, Wuming stabbed his spear into Shitendaji's neck, but Shitendaji smiled. She was disappearing bit by bit. Although Shitendaji couldn't speak because Wuming had pierced his throat, Wuming was able to read Shitendaji's words through the shape of his mouth. I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City then. Shitendaji turned into magic and dissipated. Rumble. Suddenly, the earth began to shake violently. Matthew supported Gadatsi, who almost fell. Karna and Nightingale looked behind Wuming. Wuming turned around and looked at the huge Denver City, or Himeji City. In the second half of Himeji City, a huge pillar rose from the ground. Countless eyes were inlaid on this huge pillar of flesh, turning and blinking from time to time. It was very terrifying. That's a demon god pillar? Gadatsi cried out in surprise. After all, Gadatsi had already experienced 4 singularities and encountered many demon god pillars, so she naturally recognized it. Nightingale and Karna were also shocked. After all, the aura emitted by the huge pillar of flesh in the distance was a bit terrifying. While everyone was surprised, Wuming shook his head helplessly. I was tricked by Shitendaji again. Shitendaji set up Poison City and sent Ibaraki Duji, Lulu Guzan, and Tamamonome to intercept Wuming. It seemed that they were going to attack Gadatsi, and Wuming would quickly return to protect Gadatsi. But in fact they were misled. With this plan, Wuming and others were transferred away, giving the servant at the back of Himeji City an opportunity to summon the demon god pillar. However, according to Shitendaji's words, I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City. It was very likely that this demon god pillar was controlled by Shitendaji. This also proved why it took so long to summon the demon god pillar, because it needed Shitendaji's consciousness to be stored in this huge pillar of flesh. Sure enough, it confirmed Wuming's thoughts once again. Even if Shitendaji left, he must have left me a lot of trouble. Karna, you stay with Matthew and Nightingale to protect Tachika. I'll go meet that guy, Wuming said to Karna. Karna didn't speak, just nodded, and then stood beside Gadatsi. Although Gadatsi always had Matthew by her side, she couldn't guarantee that she could completely protect some powerful servants. Just like Shitendaji just now, Matthew found it a little difficult to defend against the pervasive poisonous gas. Also because of guilt, Matthew didn't speak, but obediently stayed by Gadatsi's side. Gadatsi, on the other hand, seemed to be in a bad mood. That's the demon god pillar. How can I let you go alone? Gadatsi mercilessly rejected Wuming's proposal. Although Matthew didn't speak, the worry in his eyes was still seen by Wuming. Wuming stared blankly then laughed. Don't worry, didn't I say? I'm not an ordinary servant. Wuming smiled and comforted the two. But Gadatsi still didn't agree, and wanted to refute. Trust me, you and Matthew staying here will make me feel more at ease. Wuming looked at Gadatsi and Matthew firmly. It wasn't that the two of them were burdens. Well, in fact, it was a little bit. Cough cough. The most important thing was that Wuming believed that the demon god pillar was controlled by Shitendaji. Facing a different demon god pillar, Wuming really didn't feel at ease letting Gadatsi and Matthew go with him. And with Wuming's strength, it wouldn't be too difficult to deal with the demon god pillar with some effort. It was also because of this that Karna agreed to stay and let Wuming go to the battlefield alone. Although the two of them seemed to be tied in the previous battle, Karna knew that he couldn't beat Wuming, who cheated. Since that was the case, he had enough strength on the battlefield, so he was responsible for protecting Gadatsi. In the end, Gadatsi and Matthew nodded and chose to believe in Wuming. And Wuming realized that one of them was missing. Where did Nightingale go? Gadatsi and Matthew also realized that Nightingale was missing. At this time, Karna, who was loyally acting as a weapon, spoke. As for the nurse, she ran toward the demon god pillar while you were talking. As expected of the obedient Karna, if you don't ask, he won't say. Wuming rubbed his forehead with a slight headache. Chapter 515. At the back of Jilu City, the huge tentacle-like demon god pillars were wriggling about. The eyes on the demon god pillars would turn from time to time, blinking, looking particularly terrifying. A strange sound came from the demon god pillar. It was a sound that humans and even servants could not make. This was the unique cry of the demon god pillars. Along with the demon god pillar's cry, dense purple fog was emitted from the demon god pillar's eyes. The purple mist didn't move fast, but it was very powerful. The first half of the Holy Grail enhanced version of Jilu City was basically destroyed by Wuming and Ibaraki's noble artifacts. However, the second half of Jilu City was still intact because of Wuming's noble artifacts. When the purple fog emitted by the demon god pillars came in contact with the palaces and pavilions of Jilu City, the moment it came in contact with them, those palaces and pavilions were immediately corroded. It was like a deadly poison. Although the purple fog moved slowly, because it didn't encounter any resistance, gradually, the buildings in the back half of Jilu City, with the demon god pillars as the center, melted away. Taking a closer look, nearly half of the buildings in the back half of Jilu City had been corroded and melted away. The melted buildings were like ordinary water that blended into the ground. Although the ground wasn't decayed, the gradual blackening of the ground proved that it didn't escape the corrosion of the poison. Nightingale pledge, I will eradicate all poisons and all harmful things. In an instant, along with the release of the true name of this precious artifact, a part of the purple mist in front of the demon god pillar disappeared, including the ground that had already turned black. The ground returned to its original color. Not only that, but there were also signs of sprouting on the ground that was covered by the relic. Oh, it's your nurse again? We really don't get along well. At this moment, Shitendaji's voice came from the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar's voice wasn't completely Shitendaji's. There was a strange sound mixed in as well, which was probably the demon god pillar's own voice. Without a doubt, Wuming's guess was correct. However, Nightingale did not answer demon god Shiting's question. Instead, she tried her best to unleash her noble artifact. Nightingale's noble phantasm, I will eradicate all poisons, all harmful things, forbidden phantasm, was an area with Nightingale as the center. It could nullify all poisons and attacks. This noble phantasm was a concept noble phantasm. It was a combination of the spiritual sublimation of Nightingale, who galloped on the battlefield and faced death, coupled with various anecdotes of her, as well as the concept of angel in white who helped the sick and wounded, which was established in modern times. It was proven that a concept relic had an advantage over a physical relic. It was a grade C+ anti-army relic. I will eradicate all poisonous and harmful creatures. The territory that it displayed was like an invincible holy territory. There was no poison or harm at all. The surrounding purple fog surged violently into this area, intending to corrode it. However, no matter how much of it was useless. The poison that entered was completely eliminated by this precious artifact. As this noble phantasm was centered around Nightingale, while Nightingale was unleashing her noble phantasm, she was constantly moving towards demon god Shiting. However, as the range of the noble phantasm was not very large, the moving Nightingale had already seen such a scene. Amidst a large expanse of purple mist, a circle without any purple mist was moving towards the most important sky pillar. It gave off a feeling of a mantis trying to stop a chariot and overestimating its own capabilities. However, that was the truth. Looking at Nightingale, who was moving towards him with all her might, demon god Shiting laughed. If it was the previous me, you would indeed be my nemesis. However, this is a demon god pillar, Miss Nurse. The moment demon god Shiting finished speaking, an even thicker dark purple fog emerged from behind the demon god pillar. Just by looking at it, Nightingale, who was a berserker, could feel the danger from it. The dark purple fog contained a large amount of magic and rushed towards Nightingale's noble phantasm domain at an extremely fast speed. No matter what it was, there was a limit to it. Wuming's almost infinite magic, Avalon, which was rumored to be able to block even a world-defying noble phantasm, and Nightingale's noble phantasm domain were the same. The reason why Wuming's magic was said to be infinite was because of his overly large base, super recovery speed, and the fact that he had no place to use these 3 points. The reason why Avalon could block the world-defying noble phantasm was because Avalon had not encountered a stronger attack. At the very least, Wuming believed that if he used the Great Source to launch an attack, Avalon would not be able to block it. Since that was the case, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain also had its limits. It seemed like Nightingale's noble phantasm could completely restrain Shutting Doji's poison. However, if it encountered a large amount of poison that could not be eliminated in time, or if it was not poison but a powerful magic attack, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain might not be able to eliminate it completely. Demon God Shutting had such a plan. He did not continue to release poison. Instead, he released the Demon God Pillar's Demon Fog skill. The powerful Demon Fog surged towards Nightingale's domain. As expected, although Nightingale's noble phantasm had eliminated part of the mana fog, most of it remained and continued to fly toward Nightingale within the noble phantasm. Nightingale did not say a word, allowing the dark purple fog to gradually approach her. She knew that she could not resist it. Mystery would be ineffective in front of a higher level of mystery. This was probably the theory behind it. Nightingale was considered a modern person. In terms of mystery, she was much weaker than the Demon God Pillar. Moreover, Nightingale's noble phantasm was only a grade C noble phantasm. It was impossible for it to eliminate any damage. In this case, Nightingale, who did not have any other powerful abilities, might be defeated this time due to Berserker's impulsiveness. However, she did not regret it. If she wanted Berserker to regret it, she might have to wait until her next life. Of course, if Nightingale was alone, she would definitely be defeated here. However, there was no doubt that Nightingale was not alone. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of chains, Nightingale was tied up by a silver-white chain, and was pulled out of the attack range of the dark purple fog. Oh, you're not satisfied with the speed? Demon God Shutting spoke again. After all, no matter if it's Shitendaji or the Demon God Pillar, they're all my enemies. Wuming replied Demon God Shutting calmly as he kept the pseudo-heavenly lock back into the golden ripple. As Nightingale's noble phantasm was still activated, although the poisonous fog had spread over, it did not corrode Wuming. Then play with me for a while. My new enemy. Looking at the dark purple fog that was controlled by Demon God Shutting, Wuming began to recall what Tamamo-no-Me had said. Chapter 5:16. Wuming was on his way to Demon God Shutting. When Wuming passed by the central Great Hall, he discovered that Tamamo-no-Me was still sitting on the platform in front of the hall, not moving at all. And at this moment, the omnipresent poison gas was emitted from the central Great Hall, about to reach Tamamo-no-Me. Even people who didn't know what the mist was would feel danger, let alone Wuming who knew what the purple mist was. Wuming extended his hand and golden ripples appeared. The pseudo-heaven lock appeared from the ripples, and in an instant, the pseudo-heaven lock wrapped around Tamamo-no-Me. Immediately afterwards, Wuming waved his hand, and the chains pulled Tamamo-no-Me over. Tamamo-no-Me didn't resist, and let Wuming pull her over with the chains. Catching Tamamo-no-Me and retrieving the chains, Wuming asked subconsciously, "Why are you still here? The Demon God Pillar's attack is already here." The reason why Wuming asked this was because even if Tamamo-no-Me had the immunity granted by the Holy Grail, even if she could defend against the Demon God Pillar's poison, the Demon God Pillar still had other attacks. Since the poison gas could reach here, the Demon God Pillar's other attacks would naturally be able to as well. However, in response to Wuming's question, Tamamo-no-Me smiled sweetly. "Didn't you tell me to stay here? This is your promise." Tamamo-no-Me winked at Wuming like a mischievous child. With Tamamo-no-Me's words, Wuming felt rather awkward. Actually, Wuming didn't care about his words at all. Seeing that Tamamo-no-Me had told him the truth, Wuming only warned Tamamo-no-Me not to play any tricks behind his back. Wuming only used the words "stay here and don't go anywhere" to warn her. Wuming didn't think that Tamamo-no-Me wouldn't do anything in the face of danger. Who would have thought that Tamamo-no-Me would be so serious? Take it that I didn't say it well. However, remember this. You can go back on an unimportant agreement like this when your life is in danger. Wuming said very seriously. But, that was my first promise with you. I don't want to break it just like that. However, since you personally came to help me break the promise, then I'll let it go this time. Tamamo-no-Me smiled, acknowledging Wuming's words. Also, Lord Sarander, how much longer are you planning to hug me? Tamamonome smiled innocently. Wuming's expression turned awkward, and he quickly put down Tamamonome. After using the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Tamamonome over, Wuming withdrew the heaven lock. Wuming then hugged Tamamonome like hugging a cat. Speaking of which, hugging Tamamonome was no different from hugging a cat. Cough cough. Back to the main topic. Since you've kept your promise, I'll temporarily treat you as my partner. Keep walking towards the city gate and meet up with Chaldea's master. Although Wuming said that he would treat Tamamonome as his partner purely because of the promise, Wuming did not completely believe him. Who would completely believe a strange woman who was originally an enemy but suddenly said that she wanted to marry you when she saw you? Seeing that Tamamonome did not try anything funny, Wuming decided to temporarily let her join the party. Moreover, even if Tamamonome betrayed him, it would be fine. Karnak was there, so he was not afraid of Tamamonome betraying him. Tamamonome nodded regretfully, as if she was unhappy that she did not become his wife. However, Tamamonome seemed to have thought of something, and she nodded honestly, and then asked, "What about you, Lord Sarander? If I'm not wrong, you're going to destroy the demon god pillars, right?" Wuming naturally nodded and admitted it. There was nothing to hide. Could it be that Wuming came here specifically to save Tamamonome? Wuming and Tamamonome's relationship was not that good. Regarding this, I have something to say. Tamamonome bowed to Wuming, as if she was really putting herself in the position of a subject. Wuming nodded. Since there was information, he naturally had to listen to it. After Wuming nodded, Tamamonome spoke. Actually, the Holy Grail was placed with Judge Ji, but I feel that this matter has nothing to do with her. It was completely planned by Shitendaji. You are indeed the concubine of justice. Wuming nodded. Previously, when Shitendaji had mouthed to Wuming to wait for you in Jiro City, Wuming had more or less guessed it. After all, Jiro City was the residence of Judge Ji, the monster of the city. It wasn't strange for it to become a noble artifact. Actually, when your noble artifact landed in this city, even though Judge Haim borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, in order to resist your somewhat cheating noble artifact, Judge Haim herself probably didn't have a good time waiting for me. Shitendaji didn't take back the Holy Grail, and instead left it with Judge Haim. Hearing this, Wuming came to a realization. This made sense. Even if Wuming's abnormal cheating noble artifact was blocked by Jiro City, it shouldn't have left Jiro City in ruins. It shouldn't have left anything behind and directly exploded into ashes. If he borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, then it made sense. Listen to your nonsense. Have you never seen Judge Ji? Wuming asked. After all, Tamamonome's words showed that she didn't know the truth. That's right, Sarander-sama. Shitendaji asked me to stand guard here after Punbuji blocked your noble artifact. I will try my best to delay you with the formation of the formation. Suzuka Guzan and Ibaraki Doji were also sent out. Then, Wuming knew what happened after that. Karna stalled Suzuka Guzan. Wuming came here and was told the reason by Tamamonome. And when he returned, he was stopped by Ibaraki. They fought and Ibaraki self-destructed. In the end, Shitendaji died, but the demon god pillar was summoned. Actually, I wanted to visit Judge Ji after you left and retrieve the Holy Grail for you. But because of the agreement between you and me, I didn't do so. Wuming raised his eyebrows. So you're blaming me? Okay, it seems like you're blaming me. Asterisk cough cough asterisk Wuming shook his head and said, I don't think that even if you take the Holy Grail away, the demon god pillar can't be summoned. Wuming believed that Shitendaji's death was the trigger for the demon god pillar to be summoned. It was very likely that Shitendaji had done something to the Holy Grail from the beginning, using his own life as the trigger. Once Shitendaji left, the Holy Grail would automatically activate and summon the demon god pillar with Shitendaji's consciousness. Moreover, it's hard to say if you can defeat Judge Ji. Actually, when Wuming was hugging Tamamonome, Wuming had already noticed that Tamamonome didn't have much fighting strength. Compared to the white-faced, golden-haired nine-tailed fox Tamamonome who was recorded as one of the three demons, the current Tamamonome was just a support fox. Although that's the case, I don't think that Judge Ji will fight back. Tamamonome smiled. This made Wu Ming puzzled. Could it be that these two were good friends? Chapter 517. Facing Wu Ming's doubts, Tamamonome covered her mouth with her sleeve and smiled. That's what your concubine thinks. That's why your concubine said that the summoning of the demon god pillar had nothing to do with Judge Heim. Damn, she's even keeping me in suspense. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Nightingale probably can't hold on any longer. With that, Wu Ming prepared to leave. Wu Ming-sama. Tamamonome suddenly opened her mouth and called Wu Ming by his real name. Wu Ming turned his head and stared at Tamamonome. Facing Wu Ming's stare, Tamamonome smiled apologetically and said, "You're an existence blessed by Amaterasu Amikami's incarnation. Make good use of that power." With that, Wu Ming left. After all, if he delayed any longer, Nightingale really wouldn't be able to hold on. Following that, Wu Ming recalled the scene from before. Wu Ming used the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Nightingale back. Blessing from the sun god. Wu Ming recalled Tamamonome's words and thought of the sun rain. By the way, Shitendaji, have you ever felt the despair brought by the sun? With that, Wu Ming closed his eyes and began to feel the mysterious power that entered his body without him noticing. Oh, I didn't even feel despair from Minamoto no Reiko. Can you make me feel despair? Demon god Shitendaji let out a strange sound. Following that, he began to make the first move. The countless eyes on the demon god pillar spun faster and faster, gathering magical power. Following that, each eye released a heat ray comparable to a holy sword. The heat rays gathered together and formed a huge pillar of light with a diameter of 100 meters, attacking Wu Ming and Nightingale. Wu Ming opened his eyes and waved his hand. Gate. Nightingale chanted a simple incantation, and a purple ripple appeared beneath her feet. Nightingale fell down in an instant. After Wu Ming heard a scream, Nightingale was completely engulfed by the purple ripples. Arthur's gift armor. After releasing the concept relic once again, the armor on Wu Ming's body detached and formed a shield. The shield formed a light film and welcomed the heat rays that the demon god Shutting shot out. Zzz. The expected explosion did not happen. The shield's light membrane disintegrated all the heat rays from the demon god wine swallowing, turning them into pure magic power that spread out in all directions with a sizzling sound. Gate. Chanting the incantation again, Wu Ming's figure behind the shield disappeared, leaving only a purple ripple. Suddenly, the demon god pillar made an incomprehensible sound. It was a scream that belonged to the demon god pillar. Behind the demon god pillar, Wu Ming was holding his holy spear. The front half of the holy spear had already pierced one of the eyes behind the demon god pillar. Although there were eyes behind the demon god pillar, because Wu Ming appeared too quickly, the demon god pillar did not react at all. As for how Wu Ming came over, the purple ripple that was slowly closing behind Wu Ming became a powerful explanation. Wu Ming could use the teleportation portal to any place he had been to and any place he could see. Wu Ming pulled the holy spear out of the demon god pillar's eye, jumped back, and left the demon god pillar's body. The moment he left, a large amount of dark purple fog appeared from the eyes of the surrounding demon god pillars. Without a doubt, if Wu Ming did not dodge, he would have been enveloped by the dark purple fog. Without the protection of his armor, Wu Ming did not dare be careless. Even if the dark purple fog did not seem like poisonous fog, who knew whether it would dissolve in an instant? Because of the damage, the demon god pillar stopped releasing heat rays. And because of this, Wu Ming's noble artifact also stopped. However, Wu Ming did not let the noble artifact recover his armor. Compared to the permanent noble artifact's armor form, the shield form after true name liberation was much more useful. However, it was unable to move in time. The demon god Jiotun naturally noticed that the shield did not arrive at Wu Ming's side in time. Immediately, the eyes behind the demon god pillar began to revolve violently. Along with the condensation of magic, heat rays were also released. The target was naturally Wu Ming, who was behind the demon god pillar. Gate. The shield that appeared from the purple ripple blocked the demon god pillar's attack. Although the shield itself was unable to come over in time, Wuming had a way to make the shield come over. The teleportation gate that Wuming used to teleport behind the demon god pillar was not closed. Wuming expanded it and opened another teleportation gate in front of him. Naturally, the shield could come over. Next, Wuming used the teleportation gate to launch a sneak attack on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar attacked Wuming, while Wuming used the teleportation gate to block the damage. Although it seemed like Wuming had the advantage, that was not the case. Because Wuming had the concept noble artifact, the demon god pillar was unable to hurt Wuming. However, Wuming's attacks were also ineffective against the demon god pillar. Wuming stabbed in different places with his spear. However, after stabbing, the demon god pillar's powerful body would heal his injuries. One was the Dragon of Origin's spiritual base, while the other was the demon god pillar controlled by Shitendaji. Both of them were life forms with a high degree of mystery. This created a very awkward situation. Wuming could not hurt the demon god Shitendaji, while the demon god Shitendaji could not hurt Wuming. "Ah, your tortoise shell is really tough." Shitendaji was not upset at all. "Your recovery ability is not bad either, demon god Shitendaji," Wuming replied. He, since that's the case, I won't play with you anymore." After demon god Shitendaji finished speaking, the huge demon god pillar began to move towards Gadatsi. She was not prepared to fight this unsolvable battle with Wuming. She was prepared to get rid of the most important person. Wuming would definitely not allow that. Once again, he used the teleportation gate to arrive at one of the demon god pillar's eyes, and stabbed with the holy spear. The demon god pillar was already used to having its eyes pierced, and because Shitendaji was not prepared to pay attention to Wuming, the demon god pillar did not move at all. However, Wuming smiled. "Found it." Wuming said before that he wanted Shitendaji to experience the despair brought by the sun, and close his eyes to feel the blessing of the sun rain. Naturally, he would not play such a boring game with demon god Shitendaji. The reason why Wuming kept stabbing the demon god pillar was actually to find the holy grail inside the demon god pillar. Wuming did not think that the summoned demon god pillar would put the holy grail aside and not devour it. It could be said that without the holy grail, the demon god pillar's strength would definitely decrease. However, Wuming did not want to take out or destroy the holy grail. At this moment, a large amount of black fog suddenly enveloped Wuming. This was a magic corrosive fog that was even purer than the dark purple fog from before. "I already knew that you were looking for the holy grail. You should thank me, I let you find it on purpose," Shitendaji's mocking voice could be heard. After all, Shitendaji was not an idiot. He guessed what Wuming was thinking, so he set up this trap to make Wuming fall into it. "Of course I knew that this was a trap. After all, if it was you, it would be impossible for me to find the holy grail. So I took the initiative to jump into this trap." Wuming's voice came from the black fog, and it was a rather spirited voice. It did not sound like it was being corroded at all. After all, only this way can I release my authority. Chapter 518. Although Wuming had cheated, he did not have any trump cards like the Savior Sword or the 12 clones because of Celander's spiritual base. Wuming had only created an ordinary spiritual base in the root of Genesis, and sent it to this singularity. Celander's identity was created by Maeve using the Holy Grail, so Wuming did not choose to interfere. After all, being invited in and barging in were two different concepts. Moreover, even without the Savior Sword and the 12 clones, Wuming was not weak. However, although he wasn't weak, he couldn't really injure demon god Shutting without using a noble artifact. If he wanted to cripple him, he would have to use a super energy storing noble artifact again. However, Wuming did not plan to use a relic in the first place. As he had a concept relic to defend himself, the demon god pillar's attack could not hurt Wuming. It was a sad story. Therefore, Shitenji could only use the Holy Grail to lure Wuming out from behind the tortoise shell. Wuming also needed to come into contact with the Holy Grail, so Shitenji's actions helped Wuming. Previously, Wuming had received the sun rain from Tamamonome, and received the sun god's blessing passively. After Wuming found out that the blessing was from the sun god, he wanted to use it to blow up the demon god Shitenji. How would he blow it up? Of course, he would use his authority to transform into the sun. With the sun god's blessing, Wuming did not need to change his class. He could directly use the Holy Grail to connect with the root of Genesis, and use the sun god Shitenji. Of course, due to various factors, this move was only a one-time use. After it was used, it would be gone. However, based on the current situation, Wuming felt that it was worth it. If the demon god Shitenji was allowed to wreak havoc in the American continent, the entire continent would probably turn into a land of poison in a few days. This proved the saying once again. Even if he left, Shitenji would still cause trouble for Wuming. That was why Wuming decided to directly use the sun god's blessing upon seeing Shitenji turn into a demon god pillar, and connect to the great origins usage of the Holy Grail. This was also why Wuming wasn't the slightest bit nervous, even after falling into Shooting's trap. Because the sun's flames would burn everything. For the sake of victory, quickly come before me. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Horses with enough intelligence, bring me the light wheel that symbolizes your master. After Wuming finished chanting, the fog surrounding Wuming began to glow. Boom. A ball of golden flames broke out from the fog with an explosion, starting to burn on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar once again let out an incomprehensible sound of pain. General, demon god Wine Tun. Immediately afterwards, the golden flames instantly covered the entire demon god pillar. A strange scene appeared in G Road City. The giant pillar burning with golden flames kept twisting, as if trying to get rid of these deadly flames, but it couldn't get rid of them. A deep sense of powerlessness came from this flame pillar. Amaterasu. On the hillside outside G Road City, Tamamonome looked at this scene and said softly, "Ha, Caster, what did you say?" Godatsi, who was standing beside Tamamonome, asked doubtfully. "Nothing, Master Sama." Tamamonome smiled and covered it up. Godatsi didn't ask again, but focused on the giant flame pillar. Just now, the burning of the demon god pillar made Godatsi shout. She was very excited, and now she calmed down. Nightingale, who was teleported by Wuming to Godatsi's side, saw that the virus was about to be finished and relaxed a lot. Amaterasu. Karna said faintly. He heard Tamamonome's words. Matthew and Karna, two people, one on the left and one on the right, stood beside Godatsi and Tamamonome. The former was guarding his senior, and the latter. It seemed that because of the sun attribute, Karna had a good impression of Tamamonome. At least he could talk to her and wouldn't ignore her. Of course, Tamamonome was also very interested in this same kind. As long as it was related to the sun, it was a good thing. Immediately afterwards, the golden flame slowly disappeared, and the huge demon god pillar disappeared along with it. There was no doubt that the demon god pillar disappeared. With Wuming's power, the sun incarnation disappeared, just like Lev in the Winterwood City. It's just that the demon god pillar, Florence, died and there was still Lev left, but demon god Wine Tun died. There was nothing left. No, it should be the only thing left. Wuming looked at the original position of the demon god pillar, and thought with a strange expression. At this moment, a girl who was dressed like a Japanese princess was lying on the demon god pillar's position. Her eyes were spinning in a spiral shape. There was no doubt that this girl was unconscious, and it wasn't light. Wuming could faintly hear the unconscious girl mumbling something subconsciously. No more torture. No more torture. Wuming smiled, not knowing what to do. Looking at this princess girl who was no longer being tortured, she was probably talking about Tamamonome's punishment princess. It seemed that Tamamonome had been brought into the demon god pillar when it appeared. Otherwise, Wuming didn't think that Tamamonome would have been able to survive until now in the demon god pillar's attack range. I think I understand why Tamamonome said that Tamamonome wouldn't be the one who summoned the demon god pillar. Looking at Tamamonome's appearance, she had been unconscious for a long time. She had probably fainted after blocking Wuming's treasured artifact. Shitenji placing the Holy Grail in front of the unconscious Tamamonome made sense. Shaking his head, Wuming stopped paying attention to Tamamonome and looked at his hand. Wuming held the golden Holy Grail with one hand. Sensing the magic on it, Wuming smiled. He had finally recovered a holy grail. Not long after, Gadatsi's group arrived. As if it was a coincidence, when Gadatsi's group arrived, Tamamonome turned into magic and left. After blocking Wuming's treasured artifact, being sucked into the demon god pillar, and being injured by Wuming's sun incarnation, it was already a miracle that she was able to last until Gadatsi's group arrived and didn't leave with the demon god pillar. Placing the holy grail in his golden ripples, Wuming looked at Gadatsi and sighed. Finally, the first holy grail has been collected. Why do I feel so tired for some reason? Wuming thought. Chapter 519. Wuming did not choose to let Chaldea retrieve the Holy Grail. Not to mention that Chaldea had not been contacted yet. Moreover, even if Wuming was contacted, he would not easily hand over the Holy Grail that he had just obtained to Chaldea's group. It was not that Wuming was greedy, but because Wuming was worried that the Holy Grail newly created by the Magic King would have some kind of trap. Wuming did not think that the Magic King's game would be so simple with only a few forces. However, it seemed that for the current Gadatsi and others, the 5 forces were indeed difficult. However, to Wuming, the current chaotic battle between the 5 forces did not pose much of a threat. Although he did not know why the Magic King did not appear in person, even so he could not do anything to Wuming. After all, it was not his main body. However, the Magic King who did not appear gave Wuming a feeling that there was something more important that he could not come. However, when they were in the underground of London, the Magic King said to Gadatsi and others that as long as they did not open all 7 singularities, they would not be a threat to him at all. Just like how ordinary people would not care whether ants could hurt them, whether it was 1 ant or 7 ants, it was all the same. According to the Magic King, only when all 7 singularities were saved, would he take the initiative to kill Gadatsi and others. During this time, Wuming did not think that the Magic King would sit in front of the TV and eat popcorn while watching Gadatsi and others take risks. Then there was no doubt that the Magic King also had something to do. However, because of Wuming's intervention, Wuming was not sure whether the Magic King really did not eat popcorn and sit in front of the TV to watch what happened at this singularity. In any case, these new Holy Grails did not make Wuming feel at ease. So Wuming and Gadatsi agreed that the Holy Grails that they obtained later would be temporarily guarded by him. Wuming and others walked out of Jiro City and began to move towards Riverton in the north. Jiro City did not seem to be a noble phantasm that would disappear with the servants. The Japanese forces were destroyed, and the Holy Grail was recovered by Wuming, but Jiro City was still there. It was still the same ruins, or even worse, razed to the ground. Let's not talk about the collision between Wu Ming and Ibaraki Boy's noble artifacts. The demon god pillar's poisonous fog and all kinds of destruction were enough to destroy Jiwei City, which had lost its defenses due to Jiji's coma and overload. Wu Ming guessed that Shitendaji, because of this, he used the Holy Grail to summon the summoned monsters to leave the summoned monsters, leaving only the servants. Wuming Doji. Gadatsi, Matthew, and Nightingale was to be in the middle. In the middle was to the rears. In this way, Wuming Doji's group did not move fast, and it could even be said that they were moving slowly. After all, they had just won a battle, and there was no need to be too anxious, so Wuming Doji's group of 6 walked slowly. In fact, it was also to take care of Gadatsi. After all, it was rare for them to come into contact with the current crisis, so there was no need to carry Gadatsi as if they were transporting goods. However, they could not be too careless, as the current lineup of 6 people could be seen. Wuming Doji and Karna were in front and behind, while Matthew and Nightingale were guarding Gadatsi in the middle. As for Tamamome, who had been following behind Wuming, she followed by herself. Besides, it would not affect them much, so Wuming acquiesced. However, it seemed that it really did affect them. Along the way, Gadatsi Doji and Matthew kept looking at Wuming strangely, as if they were shy, as if they were praising him, as if they were gratified. In short, it was that kind of strange look that Wuming could not put his finger on. The more Wuming Doji thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong, so he asked Tamamome, "Did you say something strange when you came here and met up with Tachika Doji and the others?" "Lord Celander, you're overthinking it. I merely politely introduced myself as your fiancé to you, master. Tamamo smiled elegantly at Wuming. Wuming Doji finally understood why Gadatsi Doji and Matthew Doji were looking at him in such a way. But I didn't say that I wanted you to be my fiancé. Forget it. Let's leave it at that for now. Seeing that it was because Tamamo had fought the demon god Shutting, Wuming Doji decided to take a loss and leave their relationship at that for the time being. Hello. Speaking of which, why is Miss Nightingale here? Wuming asked Gadatsi and the others behind him. Although Wuming's team of 6 had arranged themselves in a strict manner, Wuming, who was leading the way, and Karna, who was bringing up the rear, were only a few meters away from Gadatsi. Therefore, Wuming didn't need to raise his voice or wait until he was close enough. He could just ask directly. Oh, you're talking about this problem. Actually, it's like this. Gadatsi smiled and explained to Wuming. After Wuming heard this, he began to have some doubts about luck. That night, Wuming instigated Nightingale to perform an amputation operation on Achilles. Achilles was already fed up with the berserker, so he ran away. Naturally, Nightingale let go of this excellent amputation material and chased after him. The two chased each other on the land southeast of the Missouri River that was not under the influence of Rome and Greece. In this way, Nightingale chased after Achilles for a few days, but in the end, Achilles was more skillful and escaped Nightingale's pursuit. After all, he was a cavalry. Nightingale, on the other hand, could not find her target, so she began to save others along the way. For some reason, ordinary natives, soldiers of the Revolutionary Army, and so on were still wandering. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even in an era where the 5 forces were divided, humans could survive on their own. The location of Denver was not so much located in the Rocky Mountains, but more accurately, it was located at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. In other words, the terrain was not high. Coincidentally, Nightingale's original location was south of Riverton and north of Denver. In this way, if she walked a little further south, Nightingale would not be far from Denver. Coincidentally, Shitendaji's poison was a pathogen for Nightingale. After feeling the poison blown away by the explosion between Wuming and Ibaraki Doji's noble artifacts, Nightingale came to Denver with her obsession as a berserker. Since most of the poison in Denver had been blown away, Nightingale was able to find people or things that were more poisonous at the moment. And there was no doubt that Shitendaji was that poison. Then Nightingale came to Gadatsi's side and used her noble artifact to resist Shitendaji's poison. What happened later, Wuming also knew about it. With her obsession as a pathogen, Nightingale, as a berserker, found Gadatsi just like that. Wuming could only smile and say, "That's really, as expected of a berserker." Chapter 520. Wuming's group didn't waste any more time. In just an hour, they arrived at Riverton. This included Karna from the American faction and Tamamo no Mae from the Japanese faction. After all, the two of them were now on the same side, and Wuming didn't think it was a secret that Riverton was a gathering place for followers, so he brought them there. After returning to Riverton, Wuming briefly told Karen and Geronimo about what they had done, including how they were accidentally found by Nightingale, Karna's support, and how Tamamo no Mae had joined Wuming. Of course, when he introduced Tamamo no Mae, he introduced her as a partner. Although Wuming did benefit from Tamamo no Mae, there was no such thing as giving one's body in return for a favor, let alone a man giving his body to a woman. Although Wuming was a bit thick-skinned, he wouldn't do such a shameless thing. ****. Let's not talk about other things, but with Karna joining us, we are already a lot stronger. After listening to Wuming's explanation, Karna nodded affirmatively. As an existence on the same level as his own disciple, Karna's strength could be said to be the best. Coupled with the memory of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, Karna was relieved that this once troublesome enemy had become an ally. Sure enough, you also remember the Battle of the Holy Grail. Karna wasn't surprised to see that Karna knew him. Karna didn't think that he was special. Since he could remember the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, then the other followers in the Battle of the 14 Horsemen would certainly remember him. Hearing Karna's words, Karna smiled at Karna to show his friendliness. At this time, Wuming looked around and found that something was wrong. By the way, aren't there some people missing? Wuming looked at the followers in the room. It was obvious that there were some people missing. As for Elizabeth and the others, they ran into a little trouble. It's fine. Gudatsi coughed awkwardly. At this moment, Gudatsi was extremely embarrassed, and Matthew was beside her, looking like he was ready for battle. This made Wuming wonder if Gudatsi had a moral crisis just now. When Wuming told Geronimo and Sharon what happened, Gudatsi was attacked by Kyoheim. After that, Elizabeth, Robin Hood, and Billy Boy threw themselves at Gudatsi and shouted, "Lady and Jun! Lady and Jun!" Kyoheim was taken away, and the scene of Gudatsi being tightly protected by Matthew appeared. As if he had thought of something, Wuming no longer asked about it. Then he asked about another person. What about Rama? He won't find trouble with Greece. Other than Elizabeth and a few other servants in the team, Wuming found it strange that Romo, the wounded, was not here. After a few days of rest, it was reasonable to say that Rama had almost recovered. Because of this, Rama should be here in such a situation. The only reason why Rama wasn't here was that he had gone to Greece to save his wife. That's right. Although Rama belongs to the ranks of the lone followers, the king is proud and arrogant. From the beginning, he had been searching for Sito alone, and did not accept our help. If it weren't for your serious injuries, we wouldn't have met again, Karen explained. And through this lesson, the king has also thought it through. He is no longer alone and has decided to join us, Geronimo added. And then he went alone again? Wuming wondered. Wasn't it obvious? Although he decided to go with everyone, in the end, he still went to Greece alone. However, Sharon shook his head. This time he was not alone. Achilles went with him. In other words, after Achilles got rid of Nightingale, he returned to Riverton. Then, under Rama's strong desire, he listened to his teacher and accompanied Rama to Greece. Spartacus also went with them. Geronimo added and smiled. Wuming instantly understood Geronimo's smile, and felt a little embarrassed. If Geronimo hadn't mentioned it, Wuming would have forgotten about him. Back then, he had used the pseudo-heavenly lock to tie Spartacus up and threw him into the woods. It seemed that Spartacus was finally found by Sharon and the others. As for Wuming's pseudo-heavenly lock, it was estimated that its magic power had been exhausted and broken. After all, it had been used for a long time. Without Wuming's magic power to replenish it, it was normal for it to break. Anyway, Wuming did not feel bad about it. After all, he still had a few pseudo-heavenly locks in his spatial relics. Let's not talk about Spartacus for now. If Achilles went with them, I'm relieved. Wuming was relieved. He did not want Rama to be killed again. Although Achilles was easily tied up by Wuming's trick, as a demigod hero, Achilles was not to be underestimated. Not only did he have an almost invincible defense like Karna, but he also had many relics. For example, Achilles' shield alone was enough to block the most powerful relics of Karna and Wuming, which were comparable to natural disasters. Of course, although it would break after blocking for a while, it was enough for a battle that could end in a few seconds. Since Rama and the others have gone to Greece, let's work on both sides. Whether it was Sharon, Geronimo, Nightingale, or Karna and Tamamonome, they all understood what Wuming meant. Are we going to have a final battle? Gudatsi also understood what Wuming meant. She was shocked. That's right. Wuming decided to end the mutation of this singularity as soon as possible. With the Celtic forces, the American forces, and the lone follower forces joining forces, and the Japanese forces withdrawing, Wuming felt that now was the best time to destroy both Greece and Rome. Wuming had always felt that the trap set by the Magician King at this singularity was not that simple. He felt that Shitendaji was not the only one who knew Wuming's identity, and was targeting Wuming. The longer this dragged on, the more Wuming felt that something was going to happen. Sharon, Geronimo, what do you think? Wuming asked the two of them who were acting as the wise ones. I think we should slow down a little. After all, Rama and the others just left yesterday. They should be in Greece now, Geronimo said calmly. However, Sharon expressed a different opinion. I agree with Salander. but I suggest we only attack one of the forces for now. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.